He had all his talents sealed but made a contract with the Shadow Monarch to revive his life and people. New sister, leave a like and subscribe, and I hope you like this new project because it's very able to post even faster then. Without further ado, let's go to this Manhwa, which is absurd, and at the beginning of everything it talks about a clan of swordsmen who the Hun Kandel dominates half of the world, and people from this famous clan are born with powerful bodies and exceptional talents, and rule the world with their dominant martial power. Battles, loot, domains, a world of survival of the fittest, which justifies these three actions, and it was in this clan that our Proto was born, and he is Jin Hun Kandel, the youngest son of the clan Hun Kandel, and in the selection ritual that predicted the child's future, he chose the patriarch's sword, marking him with the child who received the destiny of the patriarch, and then his father realizes that he chose Bari's Ada and says that this. It's interesting, and Jin says that he also believed that he would only have success and glory in his future among so many things he didn't. They were as he imagined, and he wonders how that makes sense. After all, he has no talent with a sword, and the people around are incredulous. After all, Ron Kandel's glit couldn't be that bad with the sword. So he was popularly called as Hun Kandel's disgrace, being below average of his entire family, and he was called the least talented of the Hun Kandel, so his brothers will talk to him asking if he is still brandishing his sword for no reason, and the other brother tells him to leave a Slav alone. After all, he might not want to pick up a sword unless it's a special sword, and the one with white hair asks Jinha where he goes. Left his special sword, and the other asks where he put the Bari's Ada because now he is only using one wooden sword, and then he goes after the boy, wanting to confront him, telling him to respond, then kicks. The boy is even stronger, and Jin falls to the ground suffering. Then he looks at his wooden sword, and his brother asks, because he keeps using that, after all there's no reason for that, and then he steps on the boy's hand, and then Deliz thinks. Boy's notes, noting that Aquila is the basic theory of swordplay, and asks if he thinks it's going anywhere. Studying that, and he says that's why they shouldn't give chances to those who prove they aren't capable. Soon Jin starts asking him to return it, but while he worries about the paper, his other brother breaks his sword, talking that he gives Chan to those who don't recognize his place, ends up giving them useless hope as he breaks his sword. Jin tries to backtrack, but the other brother holds him by the hair, saying they are doing this for him, and they say that he should be grateful, and ask if this education that his nanny gave him, and the boy says that Gilly has nothing to do with it, and the brothers, seeing how the boy is still fighting back, say that they need to teach good lessons for him like his older brothers. So after the torture session, he says that the torment of his older brothers, old men, and his pathetic talent, he thought none of that mattered. He thought he just needed to work hard, that with enough hard work he would receive recognition from his family, and he thought this would become a proud member of Jan Kandel, and sincerely, he believed in it a lot. But the fateful thing came. Day he is expelled from his clan, and in front of the clan with the doors closed, he begins to think about the words he told him. They said that because his hard work is commendable they won't kill him, and he says that at the age of 23 he was expelled from the clan and ended up becoming a wanderer without destiny, and that was when he met his master, and that was also when he discovered that he actually had talent, and it was the talent for the forbidden act within his clan, a talent for magic. And then 3 years later he is saying that by connecting the mana that exists in nature with the magician's mana, it is possible to recover mana and strengthen the next spell he casts. Then he feels a presence flooding the room, and when he's already in complete darkness, and someone appears behind him and asks who it would be, and that being says it's me. Dire, the master of shadows. He recognizes Jinu Kandel, and he says that as the god of shadows he will propose a contract, and says that if he makes a contract with him, he will not only be able to use spiritual power but will also cancel his curse. And then he notices the curse that was on the boy, and says that it looks like he received someone's wrath when he was younger, and he says that the boy couldn't show his talent because of such an insignificant curse. He asks what curse that would be it, and Seven says that's right, the curse called Blade Illusion. It represses his talent with the sword, and it must have been a pretty painful curse for a Rum Kandel like him, so he simply touches the curse and undoes it, and says that must have been why he was attracted to Jean, and says that from that moment on, no curse will afflicts the boy by freeing him once and for all, and says that what's left for the boy is to become the swordsman, magician of the century, and he tells Jean that he will watch it with pleasure, and the boy returns to reality and immediately grabs one sword leaving the room, and then he starts to swing it around and he realizes that it was like this. Dire said because when he picked up the sword he could see its level and he notices that the sword is not heavy at all and it looks like he's just swinging his arm, and he says if he added magic to it he could take it to another level. And then he finally manages to reach the peak of his grima and says that the weakest boy in our Candle doesn't exist. Morin thinks to himself that finally his hard work is bearing fruit. But in the meantime soldiers start to look for him, and a while later G is already bleeding from all his orifices. He says he just heard something and realizes that it was Greto, and also notices that his body is very heavy for some reason, and he says this while already is buried under several rubble and starts calling for soldier, asking if anyone is there, and he notices that they are going end up dying in his sleep and realizes that he was destined for nothing. After all, he didn't have the chance to use his magic or the soldered power, and he asks why they gave him this second chance then, and after closing his eyes he wakes up in another place with small hands in the middle of a bush and realizes that those are people from his clan and looks straight ahead. He sees several swords and asks what he is carrying. After all, he is sure he had died, and soon Gil appears in front of him wishing good luck to his young master, and the boy is left wondering what he is doing there, and he soon sees a sword that he recognizes very well, the Ada Berais, and soon he realizes that he has returned to the selection ritual. Then he starts to crawl, realizing that he has gone back to the past when he was just a 1-year-old baby then. He goes to the sword and says that in the past life he picked up this sword by coincidence, and when he touched the sword everyone they are excited by the boy choosing the patriarch sword, and he says that in this life he will choose it for himself, and after the patriarch recognizes that the youngest chose the Bari's Ada, he ends the selection ritual and orders them to take him to the Storm Castle, and 6 years later in the castle people are trying to reach a book on the shelf and talk who he cannot reach, and says that it has been years since he came to the Storm Castle, and according to the rules of the home, he needs to stay there until he turns 10, so he has 3 more years to enjoy, but he says he has boredom, and then hears a strange noise and asks the maid what happened. Then she says it's in the room. The young master has a dead bird, and there he sees the animal with puncture marks made on purpose, and then he says that the only ones who would do something like that inside the Storm Castle would be the 2 who appear right away next, and they come with an evil smile, getting sad that the maid found the gift first, and say that it was a waste, and the one with black hair is called Daytona Run Candle, aged 9 years old, 11th of the one brothers, so the other one of white hair is called Raitun with Candle, 12th of the Trace Ermeos, also aged 9. That's when they start talking to Jean, asking him what he thinks of his brother's gift and asking if he's so moved to the point of crying, and then Jean. He starts to remember his brothers from his past life and says that these 2 gained fame as assassins after becoming flag bearers. He says that kids who aren't even 9 years old killed an innocent bird just to mess with him, so he gets really pissed. And Rayona tells him not to cry. After all, this is going to get ugly, and Jean remains silent, and they ask if the boy can he hear, and then puts the blame on the boy, saying that he is being arrogant, saying that he doesn't even need to pay attention to them because chose the patriarch's destiny, and he wonders why a person like that would go unarmed without luck, and Jean starts talking. Very short and loud, comes close to him asking what he said, but puts his hand on the boy's shoulder and wants to leave. Stops the aggression, but Jean holds the boy's hand, scaring him, and soon a black aura appears at the scene, and Jean says that they are being too noisy, telling them to shut up. Then Jean starts attacking, punching one of them, and Ratona soon gets nervous, but Jay doesn't stop there and continues hitting him non-stop and says he's held back until now. But he won't hold back any longer, and he says that from now on it would be good if they didn't appear in front of him anymore, and then one of the guards appears and asks what was happening there, and Jean quickly disappears with that black hour that was in his hand, and soon the officer, Initial C, asks Jean what happened there, but the boy says that they suddenly started fighting and asks if I would have listened correctly, but Jean asks if he didn't hear him. After all, the 2 of them fought with each other and ended up collapsing, and C thinks hard that even the youngest of the June Candle is brutal and decides to simply accept that and get out of there, saying that he's going to take rounds to the doctor. But the boy doesn't let him leave and says that his brothers have another place to go and tells him to follow him. The 2 go out in the rain, and Jean prepares a hole for that bird dead, leaving the 2 boys there, and then the C asks if he is thinking about leaving his brothers there. After all, the storm will get stronger and stronger. But Jean says that his brothers need to understand the severity of the situation. What they did then, C simply decides to respect the boy's opinion and follows him back home, thinking that energy was definitely not aura, so he wonders if maybe that was mana and says that if that. In any case, this may not be a simple fight between brothers, and he says he will probably need to report it to the patriarch, and meanwhile Jean looks at everything from the window and says that as he thought C will report everything to his father. That he says that C is their guardian knight but also their watchman, and he says that this must seem like magic to C's eyes, so there's no way he can stay quiet, and soon he reveals that this is spiritual power and proof of his contract with Soder, and says that thanks to this power, he discovered that the contract is also valid in this life, and the boy says that, in addition, the immunity to the curse granted by Soder to the contractor ended up causing him could escape the curse of the blade's illusion in this life. He says that Randall's fool no longer exists from now on. From now on, his life will be very different from the previous one, and he says that the only thing he needs is to meet his father. So C reports everything to the leader, and he immediately orders C to gather all the knights as he is going to meet with. The youngest and the oldest brothers realize this and say that they managed to bring together Randall's 7 knights and the 200 knights upon them, and then they set off for Storm's castle with the leader in the lead. So Mary asks who is suddenly ordered to meet, and asks the DPO brother if he knows anything. She asked her sister Luna, and she didn't seem to know anything either, so she says that she was busy knocking out the wizard before that, and Dipos. He says that the Tana twins are going to arrive at Storm Castle next year. So he says he doesn't think that's why, and maybe he's planning to go see his little brother, and Mary asks why they would go see him, and Dipos reminds her that he chose the patriarch's sword in the selection ritual, but she wonders even though he chose the sword from the patriarch, this is really necessary, but Dipos says that he never knows what his father is thinking while he gossip. Luna asks them both to be silent, and Mary thinks to herself that for her father to go and see him in person, her brother's-in must be very useful. In the meantime, Gilly is talking to Jean, saying that he can't believe that the Lord Patriarch is going to visit him in person, and maybe he is even coming to see the young masters, and the boy says no. But you think to yourself that C probably reported it to his father directly. He says that C is an inflexible person and doesn't. He could have concluded that he would use magic directly, and therefore he would have reported exactly what he observed, and he thinks that the youngest son uses an unknown power that does not have aura or mana. So his father must be coming to see personally what power is this, and he thinks it's probably not just that he wants to check this power and determine whether or not he will be able to help the future and prosperity of the clan. Then the doors open, the knights. They enter, and everyone bows before the Lord Patriarch. He immediately asks them to call the brothers to the surface, and then the 2 kneel before their father, and he says that he heard that they had a fight with Jean and asks what are his mistakes in this, and the boys look at each other and say that they didn't do anything wrong because it was Jean who made them attacked first, and also says that he used a known ability and says that it was not an aura but magic or something like that, and then they say that magic is their clan's taboo and having to turn their father against Jean. In the meantime, Mary is disappointed in both of them. They keep saying that they should interrogate him before he hides anything, but his father tells them to stop and say that their children must engrave something inside their hearts and say that they will not survive and run. Candel Sonis, he orders him to bring Yunin to his presence. While the boy goes, he thinks his father Soren Hun Candel is the strongest and Friday man he has ever met, and he is the strongest being of this era who has reached the level of a demigod. Genesis Knight, and it is said that he was once a normal man, but after reaching the level of a demigod he lost all the emotions that made him human, and it is said that he became a being who only had one obsession. Blind, focused on the clan and its prosperity, and on a father like that, someone who had no talent for church. How he was as good as nothing, but he thinks that now everything is different because in this life he won't be able to ignore him, so he enters the hall and bows before the patriarch, and then his father asks why he is calling him patriarch and not father, and Jay responds that brothers, sisters, and the guardian knights, more than 100 people of the clan, had already visited him, so he thought it was an official visit from the patriarch and decided to address him that way. Then his father realizes that this was a good answer and says that he came to the castle for other reasons, so he tells the boy to call him dad and says he's going to ask the same thing he asked his brothers and asks, what is the mistake that his brothers made in the fight, and the boy says that it is simply revenge after all. If someone is a member of Randall, he must return what he received, whether it be kindness or hate, and the patriarch asks everyone. Except they get out of there and everyone is amazed. After all, the youngest one passed the patriarch's test, so the matriarch asks what they are doing. After all, the patriarch gave an order and soon they leave and Mary is impressed with. He managed to come face to face with his father and soon realizes that his little brother might not be so bad. So then his father says that he sent everyone away to ask him something in private and says that the brothers came up. They said that he uses a special power and he says that in Randall the use of magic is strictly prohibited, and he says that the fault of this is because when you learn magic you will never reach the limit of Grima, and the patriarch asks what this is the type of power he has, and he says that if it happens to be magic the boy won't get away with it, and Jean gets ready to say, thinking that now that his father knows about his power, he will never let the boy slip up, and he tells his father, who also doesn't know what this power is. He says it's a power that isn't an aura or magic, so he wonders how he should call it by showing it to your father, call it, saying that if he doesn't mind he could give it a name, and then your father realizes that that power is the power of the first patriarch, and his father soon recognizes that power as the spirit of Bariza and is incredulous that this child was really destined to be the patriarch, and then he asks what happened to his father, and his father explains that this is the power of Sol Dire, the god of shadows, and the boy pretends not to know what is this, and his father says that Soddard made a contract with the first Padatax de Randall Ser Timar, and he says that he is the god who has been with his clan since his birth. But after Timar passed away, Sol Dire never appeared again to the Randall, and he says he doesn't know what the reason is either, but it seems like he returned to the Randall through Jean, and the boy soon decides to ask his father a question, asking if that person Sol Dire is stronger than. But his father wonders because he has never dueled against a god, so there is no way of knowing, and the boy keeps thinking about this phrase. After all, his father doesn't know why he never dueled against a god, and he thinks this is definitely a response worthy of the most powerful man, and then his father calls Jean, caressing the boy and saying that this was a good question, and he says that this innocent question from the boy became a big topic for him, and says that coming to visit his son that day was the right thing to do, and he says that now he's going to ask him something and asks how the boy wants to use this power, and the boy says he wants to use it for the good of his own clan. But his father starts laughing, saying that it is a very interesting lie. After all, the boy defeated his older brothers and left him outside in the storm, and now he says he wants to use the power for the good of his own clan, and so he tells his son to answer him honestly, and the boy thinks he won't be fooled so easily, and so he responds that he wants to use this power for his own good. So his father says that now he liked the answer, and he says he's going to keep an eye on the boy from now on. So when his father releases all the pressure that was on him, boy ends up falling, and he's happy it's over because it would have been good enough to be able to use the spirit freely. But on top of that, his father is eager to see his growth now. He says he didn't expect it to be. After all, in his past life he didn't even exchange glances with his father, and he says that now he's going to live a better life, completely different from before. And soon after, Mary goes to her little brother to give her a gift, and he asks what that, and she says it's a special gift that her sister is going to give her, so gives it to the nanny and tells her he cooks and eats it to get stronger. Then he wonders why his sister gave him a gift. So when he opens that box, he notices that it is a heart of a phoenix, and he notices that it is giving this to a mere 7-year-old boy, and concludes that his sister Mary is definitely a bit crazy. And then he thinks about Mary Randall's 7th flag bearer and a 6-star knight. Her nickname is Mary Stormy, and it is said that she has another secret name that would be the crazy woman of the region. And he says that it is obvious what reason why an insane woman with a thirst for battle would give this precious thing to her little brother, and he translates this as her telling him to grow up and become strong to fight against her, and he thinks that if he eats this at this age, it is expected that he will develop a tolerance to fire, and in addition this also increases his fire rate growth, and he remembers that the phoenix heart was needed for a 6-star mage to summon a phoenix safely, so he says that maybe in this life he can summon a real phoenix with his own Hands on it, Gilly arrives with his meal, saying that Mary left him a very good gift before leaving and tells him to eat it while it's still hot, and the boy says that before that he asks if his brothers have anything for talk to him, and they start to get Miguel talking about how it seems to be a little big for him to eat alone. Then they say they noticed that Jill was cooking a huge pot just now, and the boy asks if they want a piece of that, and then they too start to shake their heads like they were two hungry puppies, so Jean makes a wish for them, and soon after, the two of them have their parents digging a hole in the ground, asking why they have to do this. After all, there is nothing there, and asks what his brother wants, and they also ask what will happen if they find out that they dug it, and one of them says that it doesn't matter. After all, if anyone is going to get in trouble, it would definitely be Jin, and they say that this will worth it after all, just the broth is enough, and they also agree that their little brother is a little scary, and with the sound of him digging a stone rolls into a room in an installation and in a tube looking like a preserve. Someone is trapped there, and that person seems to have the same powers as Jin, so it's almost nightfall. The maid is shocked when she sees the twins arriving completely dirty, and Prota simply welcomes them to him, saying that they came back faster than he expected, and the boys just tell him to shut up. After all, they did what he wanted, and now they want some of the soup, and he says he left it there, and when the boys look, it's just 2 spoons, and they get disappointed, asking if that's a teaspoon, saying it's a lot small, but Jean says he just said he was going to share but never specified how much, so he gave a little just as he promised, and he tells his brothers to enjoy it, and they, very pissed, can only go downstairs, and Jay in turn leaves in the middle of the rain and goes to where the brothers were, saying that he thought they would do it anyway. But they did it the way he asked, and he says that for this presser, a 1-star spell should be enough, and he says he was already frustrated because he kept accumulating mana and had nowhere to use it, and so he casts the spell, breaking that wall, revealing a secret door, saying that this is the secret library of the Hun Candel, and he thinks that this is a place he couldn't go to in his past life, but he feels strange being there, and he remembers his brother saying that it was an activation phrase is needed to enter, and he recites the phrase, saying that one of Randall's children came with solar Murican, and the door opens. He says that the Run Candel library has a collection of secret tomes from the clans that Ru Candel defeated for the last 1,000 years, and he notices that place is huge. He says that this is a permitted place just to carry Randall's flags, and he remembers his brother saying that it was useless for him to know about this place since he had no right to become a flag bearer, but this ended up being useful, and he says he will take advantage. This place is quite a place, but as he walks he ends up running into that man who was inside the tunnel and asks what that is. He notices that the man has scales and asks if he is human, and when he touches the glass he wonders what that man was doing there. But he soon remembers the Murican's phrase and asks if that man it would be the Black Dragon Murican. He says he has heard about the Black Dragon losing to the first monarch and falling into a deep sleep, but he is incredulous that this legend is real, but he thinks that now is not the time for that and wonders where are the secret tomes, and while he turns to look for the dragon starts to move in it, he finally finds he was looking for these, saying that there are the secrets of all the clans. He starts with the secret tome of the famous clan of Mest's Payden, the Kungan clan, and starts reading and says that the content is a little difficult to understand, having only the 3-star theory, and says he wanted to take it with him, but he would end up getting caught, so he decides just keep copying the passages every time he goes there, and then he starts going non-stop, and one day he feels a presence behind him asking who to be, and he says that no one would come to the Storm Castle library to. At this time, the man appears on the other side of the door asking who he is, and soon he recognizes him as Murican and asks what the Murican is doing there because he doesn't remember anything in his past life about him waking up, and he thinks to calm down. After all, Murican is the guardian of his clan, so if he is polite and acts with a child, he can go easy on him, and the boy tries to make a mistake by saluting the guardian of his clan, but Murican starts to get pissed off asking who the guardian would be, and he would check with the boy if he just called him guardian, and he asks why they, who don't know anything, treat him as if he were a guardian, so he starts calling the Randalls. Damn, how dare they teach this to their children, and he even thinks it's not like he can stay angry with that kid, but he says this while he is already angry, and he falls to the ground desolate, saying that woke up because he smelled a good smell, and it had been a long time since that happened, but he ends up noticing that it's just the brat, but even so he continues to smell this smell of spiritual energy on the brat, and he says that Even though he has slept for 1,000 years, he still remembers this smell, this dense smell of spiritual energy, and he says that this is something that only someone who accepted a contract could have, and Jim notes that the reason Murican had awakened it was because of his spiritual energy, and he starts asking where did it come from. Jean gets excited to test something showing energy to Murican, asking if he's talking here. He says his father. He said that this is the power of the god of shadows, Lord Sauter, and Murican is already starting to get pissed, asking if Sauter is joking. Aim, the promise contractor of 1 year, is a softie in that he calls himself a loser, saying that had a promise with Sauter, he would have to help the person according to his promise, and that person too. Murican's unhappiness is Jean himself, so he wonders how he would have a promise with Sarad and Murican. He says he'll tell him the details later because he just woke up and he's still a little dizzy. He thinks it's going to be a little difficult for a child to understand, and says that he should formally introduce himself to the contractor, and he says that Murican is the representative of Sun Dire, your friend, and the last descendant of the first shadow beings, and according to the promise, 1 year old from today he will be with Jin, and the boy is amazed that that dragon is with him, and Murican asks the boy's name, and then he says Sir Jinho Hun Kendall the 13th. And youngest son of the Hun Kendall, and so he simply touches hands with a gigantic dragon in morals. This is too much absolute cinema, and then a little more is said about the Black Dragon Murican and Mount Murak, where the castle the storm stands was originally named after the dragon, and the Black Dragon Murican was a powerful ruler who reigned over the area for many years. However, 1,000 years ago, Murican lost the battle against the first patriarch Run Kendall, fear Hun Kendall, and say that after giving up the Murican mountain and the castle of the Murican storm, a deep sleep fell. However, these two were not enemies. The dragon was guardian and friend of the first patriarch, and the contractor of a god is usually accompanied by a guardian dragon. Knew about the Sauter dragon always being the mystery, but it makes sense if it is because Murican was in a sleep deep. Then Jean thinks that now that Murican is awake, he has gained a guardian dragon, so he returns to Murican bringing some snacks and thinking that from now on he should ask any questions he has about him in advance. Then he says that it has been months since Murican woke up and that he started visiting the secret library, and then he asks why the dragon fought with Temur, but the dragon says that this happened 1,000 years ago and asks how he wants him to remember this, and Jean thinks to himself that there was something he discovered about Murican that the dragon is unfortunately crazy about. Strawberry pie, in which the dragon asks what he's doing there, and the boy says he's doing transcription, saying that is taking notes and taking everything with him. After all, if he takes the secret to Moss, his arrivals could be discovered in this. Murican asks if he can understand all of it, and the boy says he can understand about 30%, but the dragon asks him not to be upset because he is doing very well for his age, and he says that the others are wandering around since they can't even do what he is doing, but the boy says that it is normally like this. After all, he is a Run Candle, this is the minimum that is expected of him, and he says that he has 12 sisters, older brothers, and still has his father, his mother, the oldest ones. He needs to do even more if he wants to surpass them all in this. He asks Murican if he was the first patriarch, how much of this book would he have understood, and does he think to compare himself with the best in history to see at what level he would be. However, Murican says that if Timar was his age, he wouldn't be able to understand a single phrase from that book, but he says that theory is different from a real battle because he fought well without reading these books, and Murican says that he also has talent as a Timar, but not as much as him. The boy is discouraged, thinking that he will never be able to become like the First Lord Patriarch, but the dragon is doubtful. After all, he is the soldered contractor as well as Timar, and he also has the good brain to read a book like that, and he tells the boy to train non-stop and not to be impatient, because if he does that he will become as strong as fear, so maybe he can overcome it. The boy asks, he really thinks so, and the dragon confirms positively. Asking if the boy knows what Sauter's nickname is, he says he doesn't know. So Murican reveals his nickname, his god who is infinite, and he says that as the power of Sol Dire has no limit, it also means that the power of your contractor has no limit. So the dragon tells him to stop for free and get excited about coming. He will teach him a new skill that will make the boy feel much better, and while he touches his back he starts teaching this technique, and the boy asks what that is, and Murican responds that that is spiritual liberation, and the dragon says that this is an ability that every being who uses spiritual power must master, is the beginning and end of using spirit However, it is extremely dangerous if used without proper training, so the kid has to take it slow and learn from it. Be careful with this, he says. He already understands and asks MONARCH what he needs to do first, so the boy says that first he has to learn to release of mana. This the boy is in doubt. He speaks for himself. He must learn this, thinking that he has already done hundreds of times this in your past life, and MONARCH says that spiritual liberation is the release and transfer of mana, and the boy needs to be good at these two skills, so he will have to train for at least 2 years, and the boy stays quiet, thinking that 2 to 3 years is a long time, and the dragon starts saying that he can't teach advanced skill if he doesn't even know the basics, but the kid simply releases energy asking if he can learn now, and the dragon is wondering how he did it, but the boy says that he could do it before, and soon the MONARCH asks if he can also transfer mana, and the boy quickly demonstrates that he can, and the dragon says that only the most brilliant geniuses can do this, and says that he must really be good, talented, so he will show him what spiritual liberation is like, and the boy gets excited about it, and the dragon says that the spiritual strength comes from the shadows, so every shadow in this world is born by the will of Soarad, which he states that Soarad is the master of all the shadows in the world, and he, as the only collector of Soarad, can also become the master of all the shadows in the world, and so he floods the room with several trails of shadows, and so he asks what the boy shows this spiritual liberation, and the boy gets very excited about it, and in another place they talk to the lady Luna, and they say that this area has been released, and they say that the mission will end when it clears 5 more areas, but she says that 4 months should be enough, and tells the knights to rest, and then changes the subject by asking about that a 9-year-old child generally likes. My friend checks out this fishmonger. It was absurd. So 6 months after finding MONARCH, the twins turned 10 years old and left the castle. Storm in this, they end up saying goodbye to their brother, and as for Jean, he celebrates his 9th birthday, and everyone is happy with this, and Geely makes a strawberry cake for the boy he wants to share with everyone, and after that C comes talk to him, apologizing for the sudden interruption. He asks what happened then. The cam says that Luna came to him visit, and soon he is surprised by this. After all, the first flag bearer of the Hun Candel clan is a 9-year-old female knight, stars the eldest among the 3 brothers, the white whale Luna Hun Candel, who is said to, and although she was more strong among the June Candel brothers, she abandoned her desire to become a future matriarch and got rid of the disgusting June Candel's war of succession, and she really is a white whale that moves alone, and it is said that because, furthermore, she never showed interest in any of her siblings, to the point that she was more of a stranger than family for him, and he claims that there was this gigantic distance between him in his past life. But for her it becomes the Storm Castle Dawn Nothing. He keeps wondering if something happened to her clan, or maybe she had found out that he is entering his clan's secret library, so he greets his older sister, and she tells him that he has grown a lot, and the boy Amiga saying that if she had warned him he could dress better for the she visits, and she says you're cute, but asks if she needs to let you know when she's going to see your little brother. The boy is surprised by what she said, and she asks if for some reason he is uncomfortable, and also asks if the boy is sick, but he says that it's not that after all, he's just a little nervous, and he says this is the first time he's seen her so close up, so he's a little nervous about this, and she is surprised by the boy's speech and is told that it is a family custom run candle destroy her brothers and steal one of the others. Then she realizes that maybe Jean thought she came there too. Watching him, then she starts to get frustrated, saying that it seems like he was insensitive, and says that he might even be young, but forgot that he is still a member of Run Candle, and so she apologizes to the boy and tells her older brother I wanted to talk to him alone, and asked the boy if he could ask Nanny, and the knights guardians leave their EG is surprised by this and ends up accepting it, because even though he doesn't know the reason, it doesn't seem like it be something bad, so she talks to her brother, saying that the reason she came to visit out of nowhere is that she has something to tell her. Then he asks her what it would be, and she says that when her father came to visit her, his actions caused that all the brothers started paying attention to Jean, and she says that this means that as soon as he leaves Castle of the Storm, all the brothers stood guard against him. He kept watch, but she signed to Jean that doesn't want him to get caught in a fight between the family and lose his happiness. So she claims that go would be that he wasn't hurt by Hun Candel's disgusting customs, and then he is surprised by this, thinking that this must have been The reason she gave up on becoming a matriarch, then he starts to think after all she didn't want him to become a matriarch. Hurt then because she didn't warn him anything in her past life about her brothers, so he wonders if it's because he wasn't worth it before or because his other brothers didn't see him as an opponent, so he thanks her sister's words, but she says that she intends to continue in this fight. Then she tries to say that she's not serious, because she thinks he could be a threat to her in the future, but the boy says he knows that, but he has already experienced an attempt to murder in this. Luna is incredulous with what she heard, and he says that's exactly why, even more so in this fight, but she starts to get nervous, asking if someone tried to kill her in the storm castle, and that's when it's time. Sangret starts to take over and she becomes possessed with rage, so she asks Jean who tried her murder, but he says he can't say that. After all, he doesn't know who it was yet, but he tries to calm his sister down, saying they tried but he's still fine, and he says he's actually happy that she helped him realize that not all of her brothers hate her there. And she hugs the boy, calling him her dear little brother, and says that in case he has already fallen into the middle of his clan's disgusting fight. So she is very sad because of this, and he finds her sister Luna strange, being such a sentimental person, telling her not to be sad, and she says he's right, after all she shouldn't talking about these things, and a day as happy as today. Then he is in doubt, and she says that it is her birthday, and true, she came to bring him a gift there, and hands him a chain with a blue jewel pendant, and he stands in doubt about what that would be, and she asks him to turn around a little, and she says that only once, when he is in a situation he can't handle, he can crush the blue gem of his pendant, so it doesn't matter where it is, whether she is going to meet him right away. She tells him not to forget that and to always keep it with him, and then congratulates him again on his 9th birthday, and soon after she goes to enjoy the party, eating cake with her brother, and Gil is happy with this, but anyway she needs to leave, and after he leaves he goes straight to Murikin, and he asks what's that on the boy's neck, and he says he's gone. I got this as a birthday present, and the dragon says he doesn't know who gave him this, but the person must really like him to give something like that to a boy. He asks what that would be it, and the dragon says that it is an item from the demonic beast King Orgel, and it is said that 1,000 years ago countless people died trying to get this item, and Jim asks if it is such an incredible object. Dragon says that of course it is, because he gives you immunity against any magical attack below 5 stars, strengthens the magical abilities of the bearer, and he even thinks it has a summoning function, so G notes that the dragon knows a lot about the things he talks about that was active around that same period, so the dragon assumes that the owner of the powerful energy that came to visit him gave him this, and Jean says yes, that is his older sister, so he asks how the dragon could feel that energy, and Murikin says that she must have also felt his energy, making the boy completely nervous, asking if the dragon doesn't think she's going to tell her clan about him being there. But Murikin says he is worrying for nothing because she is the sister gave him such a valuable gift, as if it were nothing, so he asks Jinho if he really thinks that she would last his little brother, and ends by saying that he can definitely trust in it. And outside she notices that as she thought she can feel a strong energy that is not there in Aints, and she thinks that if Jean is preparing something she should pretend she doesn't know anything for now, but tell him to remember that after all, no matter what he becomes or does, she will always support him. And Jean says he thought the time that would pass in the Storm Castle would be a pain, but he ended up gaining a lot from it: recognition, his father's expectations, Heart of Phoenix that he received from Mary, and a connection with Luna, and even an encounter with Yurikin the Black Dragon, and they are all things he couldn't even dream of in his past life. And so Jean turned 10, so it is said that he left the Storm Castle and continued his preparations to return home. Meanwhile he faces Kan in a duel, and ends up doing very well against him, and Kan says that as expected he is someone the Patriarch would be interested in him. Says that when he trains with someone he is the one who evaluates people, but with those eyes he is being evaluated by Jean. And when they stop training, C tries to talk to the boy, and he asks if there is something wrong with his training, but he says it was an honor to be able to teach him all this time. He says he doesn't have much more time left until he leaves the Storm Castle, he says, who promises to give him the best training possible until the end. So Jean says he's counting on him. Boy, go ahead. To an old woman, and puts her finger in the flame, saying that she finally got her immunity against fire. So Geely, she asks him if it's not hot for him, but he says no, and now it feels like warm water, and she's happy. After all, Mary's gift is there helping, and she also says that she heard about the effect of Phoenix Hearts, but This is the first time he's seen them in person. The boy says it's also his first time and thinks to himself that maybe he has already absorbed at least half of the heart and thinks that maybe he will have managed to absorb it all from now on. A few years into this, Gil tells Jean that they are going to leave the castle early tomorrow, so he asks him to let him know if he needs it. Of something like that, and he soon agrees, and she looks at those books that are on the boy's bed and asks if she should keep those books in separate places, and he says yes, and soon after she says that she will prepare strawberry pie for dessert today, and he remembers something saying that he is going to leave for a moment and says that he will be back, and if he goes to MONARCH, remind him that they are going to leave the castle tomorrow morning, and the dragon says that he obviously remembers, after all he is waiting for. This has been going on for years. So Jim asks the dragon how he plans to follow him, and Murican tells the boy not to worry. After all, he is the legendary black dragon, and no matter how weakened he is, it will be easy to say that there will be. Make sure to follow him carefully so as not to be caught, but Jim asks why he only spoke now that he is weakened. But the dragon gets in the way. Miguel saying that he has been sleeping for 1,000 years and asks how he would be as good as new, and then Jim asks if he can regain his strength, and the dragon says yes, because he will get stronger when the boy gets stronger after all. He is his guardian dragon, so he tells the boy to become the strongest magical swordsman and surpass Timar soon. So Jim, he said Randall were originally a family of magic swordsmen he remembers hearing. This coming from Sodder in his past life. The Humkandel family was originally a family of magical swordsmen, and the first patriarch was the strongest magical swordsman of all time, but almost no one knows that, so the dragon says that the reason why Run Kandel banned magic and made this rule of only focusing on the sword was because of the humiliating treaty from 1,000 years ago, and he claims that people still praise him for being the guardian of the family, but he's sure they would be comfortable if he showed up there, and he says that 1,000 years ago everyone would be marveled at his presence and would be amazed that he was accompanied by being more respected than world. So Jim asks if they would do that, and the dragon asks him if he finds the story forced. But anyway, he says he'll be sure to hide and tells the boy not to worry. But Jim asks what he's going to do about that barrel. After all, it's going to be discovered if someone goes there and it's empty, and the dragon says he's going to use magic Draconic to make a clone of himself. Then he asks what will happen if the clone is discovered, but the dragon speaks that he is the shadow dragon and can do this easily, and the Murican says that as he said he is not in his total potential, so keeping the clone around for a long time will be difficult, but he will do his best until Jean grows up and stay strong, and the boy simply thanks him for caring and says he brought him a special gift one day. Pie made with this year's first strawberry harvest and wine that he secretly took from Guile, and he orders the dragon don't be Bibia. The dragon starts to complain even though he's all polite, and then says that it was good that he was the one who raised him, and asks if he can introduce him to his nanny, and Jean says he will think about it. And now, the other day they tell Jean that when he comes home he can't wait for all the time off he had at the castle. Storm says that of course he has been busy training, but his routine is going to be much more difficult, and she'll also be much busier, and Jay says he won't be able to bake pies all the time whenever he wants anymore, so he tells her not to worry because he's going to work when he gets back home, and she says she's going to work too. Strive for him, and so the knight arrives calling Jean, introducing himself as Jerome, and at his service they say they're going to listen to the boy until he gets to the Garden of Swords, so Jean says he's counting on them and they'll follow the boy, and on October 30th, 1790 he finally left the castle of Storm, then leaves for June Candel's main house, the Garden of Swords, and while they are on the way, they notice that it is snowing a lot, so they realize that they will not be able to use the teleport portal if the snow continues like this. They will have to stop at a village nearby, but while they are in this calm, something hits their carriage. Then they say it's an ambush and order them to get out of the carriage, and Geely starts to calm his young master, telling him not to worry because Jerome and HS are 7-star guardian knights, and he still has her by her side, and she says that she has 20 warriors and mages, and there is also a chance of having archers, and she says that she doesn't think there is anyone above 7 stars since Jerome and Hertz are fighting. But Jean notices something, calling her, saying that they need to get out of this carriage right now because a Randall guardian would never leave it behind. A Randall son, and he says that one of the two has to stay by his side all the time, and he says that means that they are either fake or they are traitors, and he says that there must be some kind of device hidden inside this carriage, and that's why they need to escape. So Geely, even though he's angry, understands his young master says that starting now, as June Candel's servant, she must protect him with her life, and she already pulls Wolverine's claw and speaks to. He understands even if she has to be a little rough, and soon grabs the boy coming out of the carriage, and on the way she tells him that he must receive punishment for this incident as soon as they arrive at the main house, and he tells her that now it's not time to worry about that because they must first go to where those two are because he needs to check a thing, and he says that those who were attacking could be his allies after all if the people who set up the ambush. They were aiming at him the moment they got out of the carriage was the best time to kill him, and he says he's still very quiet. This is certainly strange, and in this he understands his young master, and a red-haired man orders them to find Jean Candel and orders Group 3 to block on the left, and he says that how did he think of a leaf emblem and an emblem of Black Beast is the Yuta clan, a magical clan of Mytel, and the Black King's mercenaries, and so they recognize her as Jilly MC Rollin, and it was confirmed that Jean Candel is still alive, and so they organize themselves to prioritize the protection of Jean Candel, and Red says he is the vice-captain of the Black King's 3rd mercenary squad and says that they came to rescue Jean Randall as well as his fam's request, and they soon turn against the traitors, and Jim doesn't think so. It was treason, in fact they were fake. He says that if they really were 7-star knights they would never have suffered so much, so after surrounding the men, he asks who they are and tells them to reveal their affiliation and their objective, and one of them says that this is a very predictable question, and he asks if she thinks they would reveal the true for a Run Candel dog, and she asks Jinho what they should do, and the boy tells them to kill one and rip off the other's arm and then bring it to him, and, as ordered, Ji leaves towards them and with perfectly what her master ordered, and seeing that the second was resisting, she tears off both arms and simply steps on his chest and drags him to his master, and the boy says that it looks like his master. He underestimated his opponent too much because to become a Run Candel drool, a person needs to be a martial artist above the 7th star, and to assassinate the son of the Hun Candel they should have sent at least 3 or 4 8-star knights, but the man tells the boy not to make him laugh because that was just a warning because the era of June Candel will end, and so Jean says that he also wants that to happen instead of the era of June Candel he wants. May the era of June Candel arrive, and so the man becomes even more pissed off, giving glory to the great Zipfel, and hearing this Jean explains that the clan of wizards that dominates the other half of the world is the Zipfel clan, and as the opposite of the June Candel who always aim for the peak of fencing, they are a clan who aim for the peak of magic, and 1,000 years ago when the first patriarch of June Candel died, Zipfel forced a humiliating pact with June Candel that prohibited him from using magic, and due to the pact the Joao Candel had his magic sealed, and for his clan Zipfel was literally an enemy of 1,000 years, so he says, I was thinking who would do something as common as trying to kill him, but since he is a follower of Zipfel, that makes sense. So Jean tells Guile to just throw him somewhere because it's not worth interrogating him. He thinks with his mind, which is clear, that the Hun Candel are also Zipfel's eternal enemies, so they regularly commit terrorism against the Hun Candel, and the boy says that today's event was different from normal and must have been independent actions of an extremist group, but there is still something strange about it, and no matter how elaborate it is, it must be difficult to deceive the 7-star martial artist, so he wonders if it was that guy's interference, and after following the boy's orders, G reports to him. Reg Jean in turn speaks to Murka, the vice-captain of the king's mercenaries, Black, and he says that it was thanks to his distraction that they managed to escape, and as soon as they return to home he will talk about his deeds, and the clan will pay him generously, and then he says that he is under his care until they arrive at the gate, and the man says he will do his best, still a little shy. He thinks what kind of boy is that? After all, even though he's Run Candel's son, it's the first time he's left the castle, and he's just a 10-year-old kid. Years old, that he says that the boy still seems comfortable and dignified, and perhaps what he said earlier about wanting the era of Jean Run Candel to arrive isn't just childish nonsense, and then he sends all his soldiers be careful until they get to the gate, and without saying harsh words, and everyone starts to complain about that, and Geely calls him saying that now they can go, and then they just kind of embarrassed tell them to go, that they asked if it would be okay to leave those imposters where they are, but the boy says everything will be fine because it doesn't matter if they go Found dead or alive, they will serve as an example to their companions, and he congratulates Gil for that she did, and she says that they will arrive at a village if they walk for more than 2 hours, and Sujinho says that they will have to wait there until they stop. It snows, so he tells Gilly not to be so sad because of the escort. It wasn't her fault, because even a 9-star knight didn't notice, and it would be even more difficult for a 3-star warrior to notice him. Says that it's also not a problem that he taught them the rules of hiding like a guardian knight, in that he apologizes again, but Jean thinks to himself that Jill never changes. He says that she is Run Candel's babysitter, and they follow the fate of the child they are in charge of. He says that Jilly was also his nanny in his past life. That's why she was underestimated by the clan, because of her someone who had no talent. However, she didn't blame him. Not once, and on the day he was exiled from June Candel, she was exiled along with him, and at that moment she apologized for not being able to serve him properly. This while bowing and apologizing, and he thinks she was. So he doesn't want to be too hard on her, but now it's different. Guile has to mature, so she speaks again. Who will accept any punishment he gives for what happened, but he yells at her, telling her not to blame herself, and says that this is an order, as she may be his nanny, but she is the only guardian knight he has now, and if she getting attached to such small things like this, she will have problems with an escort in the future, so he asks her not to do it. He repeats again, then she feels and says she will do her best to correct herself, and she thinks Jean cares with her a lot. After all, he said those words for her good, and she thinks she needs to be careful not to cause more problems for him, and then she starts to get all excited, and the boy is happy that she got excited and left that depression, and then he arrives at the pause, and Jean thinks again about those fake guardians and says that if he is right, there is a high possibility of him having interfered with the Transformer P-Var Giant, and he says that the transformation is a privilege of dragons, but not all dragons can transform perfectly, and Buvard is the only person who can transform perfectly, and he used this ability to commit several crimes of transformation and brought chaos to the world. Regan thinks that if it really was Bouvard who interfered, that will be problematic. After all, he hasn't done anything notable so far, and in his past life when he was 20 he was arrested by Varma's special forces. He thinks that if he makes him his ally he can be useful, but he has no reason to welcome someone who raised his sword against him, and he concludes that before the Bouvard gets into trouble bigger, he should see if there is anything different from his past life, but he says this while B is and Jill talks to. He will be outside if he needs her, but she notices the boy sleeping and sees that he is still a little boy in this. A black cat starts meowing outside the window, and he wakes up realizing that he ended up sleeping. He says that even though he trained so much in the Storm Castle, he thinks it's still too much to ask for a 10-year-old body, so he asks what that noise is, and then sees the cat in the window walking on 2 legs, and he quickly connects the dots, remembering Murikin saying he's going to hide and stay on his tail, so the boy didn't need to worry then. Jay asks if this is what he meant when he said he was going to hide and follow him, so he asks if he turned into a cat, but the cat gets even more pissed off, and Jean lets him in, saying he didn't expect that, and this surprised him, and he says he thought Murikin was going to disguise himself as a knight or as a servant, but Murikin says that if he did that, the knights of his clan would notice right away. As he continues talking, he ends up tripping and putting his head in the corner of the window. Gil opens the door and asks if her young master is okay, and she sees a crazy man with a headache side of her young master, and she soon activates her X-23 mode, asking who is the fool who dares to come after his young lady master, and goes after him, tell him to confess everything before she tears him into thousands of pieces, and she continues asking his purpose, but Jean stops her from waiting. After all, this person, but before he could complete the sentence, Morak Anna, who that is, Guile then calls her strawberry shortcake, saying that they finally met, and the girl doesn't understand what's with the strawberry pie, so Jim thinks they're lost after all this crazy guy is singing his song babysitter in front of him, so he makes the necessary introductions, saying that this is the guardian of Run Candel, the Black Dragon. Murikin and Geely he doesn't even need to introduce, after all the dragon is already treating her like his precious pie. Strawberry and Geely apologize for being disrespectful to the guardian of Run Candel, but Godres doesn't worry. After all, he will definitely forgive her. Gil asks why he's calling her strawberry shortcake, and he says it's because she makes the most perfect and wonderful strawberry pies, and Jay realizes why the boy was ordering strawberry pie every day, so Jean asks her to sit down so he can explain, and after When she finds out about everything, he apologizes for deceiving her all this time, but she says she didn't know that he had such an exceptional talent, and she talks about magic, the contract with a solder and a dragon. She is very happy with his babysitter, and Jean says that she is now his cream partner, and the clan cannot know that Murikin has awakened, and that he is connected with him, and she says she will be very careful, but Murikin says she doesn't need to stay so nervous about this. She notices and asks if that loud noise was the Lord's transformation, Murikin being undone, but they are even embarrassed to admit that it was nothing like that and reveal to her that it was just the cattle dragon who tripped, and Jilly goes to Jin's ear to ask if it's going to be okay to trust him. He says that we'll probably stay, so they go to the Honey Kingdom transfer gate and they thank them for everything they missionaries did and tell them that the compensation for this work will be paid by the June Candle Castle later, and they say that it was a good experience for them too, and that they are looking forward to seeing the future of young Hun Candle that she serves. Then he directs a question directly to Gilly and asks why someone with skill as big as hers left Clank Roland and became a nanny for young Hun Candle, but she says there is no big reason to mention, and he simply gets the message and apologizes for his rudeness, so they say goodbye, and when they arrive at the transfer portal they ask for his ID. Then she shows him a sheath with the June Candle symbol, asking him send them to Carlin in the Hofer Alliance, and then he realizes that that is a servant of June Candle and says that she is a honor to meet her, and then they take them to her special seats. Then they say that if they wait for 2 o'clock they will arrive in the blink of an eye, and tell the boy to have a good trip, so Giles sits next to him and says that she is very worried because he could somehow end up being discovered about Lord Murikin and the other things, and he asks if she is talking about magic, and she says yes. After all, this is the only thing that no one in the Arkandel clan will allow, he orders. She doesn't have to worry because he will hide it very well. Someone arrives, and he immediately notices that golden emblem on their clothes and realizes that she is from the Zipfel family, so the boy sits right in front of him and he recognizes that face as being quite familiar. The boy is already starting to be arrogant, saying that it is not surprising at all, not wanting to go to Rofer. After all, on the way he meets these pests there, and then the Murikin pretends be a normal cat, and the boy says that at least his cat is cute and calls the cat close, but Murikin kicks the boy's hand and his guards leave in ignorance. But the boy says everything is fine. After all, it's the act of an animal, and he thinks that picking a fight will only cause problems, and besides, it would be stupid to pull a sword in front of a run Candle. He realizes that the boy tried to irritate him out of curiosity to see the reaction. However, he realizes that Hun Candle's youngest son is cool-headed. So he introduces himself as Bijin and says that, I would like to formally apologize for being rude earlier. Then the boy realizes that Aquil is rude and says that he is a genius magus and a strong candidate as future Patriarch Zell. He is an idol among young mages for having both skills and character noble, and Jean says he is someone who felt very distant when he was a mage, and he is surprised to meet him when he is still a child, and he thinks that this is an unknown feeling, and the boy says he understands that and was also curious to know what kind of person he is, but he is happy that the boy is just an idiot, and the boy asks if this is about him, and Jean says that if they end up drawing their swords because of his stupid joke, would end up experiencing Rofer wandering around without an escort, and he would probably have lost at least 2 fingers, so the boy says that was a really scary joke, but Jean asks him if he thinks he's joking, and the boy, he soon understands the message and says that he will give him some advice too, and says that if he meets another Zipfel and if you have a similar experience, don't break his fingers hastily or something like that, as it will only cause problems for yours clan. And Jean says that this is now a very funny joke and asks the boy if he thinks that Jin's father, Soren Hum Candel, and his father he Ark Zipfel moved their clans just because of children's fights. That Began thinks a little and says that this is true because even with cut fingers he is sure he would only end up with a few gold coins as compensation, and he tells Jim that he taught him something today and he will return that favor someday, but Jim says he doesn't want his payment in the future and tells him to pay now, and the boy agrees to that, and Jim says that until the portal activates, he would like the boy to be quiet and not disturb his rest. Jean almost freaks out and stays quiet, even silently saying that he thinks Jean will become a really cool guy in a few years, and he says that if he weren't because of their clans he would have asked him to be his friend. In the meantime, you save your cough, so that the boy behave better. Then he thinks again, saying that in fact Jin could become his eternal rival because who is he? A Run Kandel, and his guard almost cries with this conclusion, and Ji is surprised that the boy is acting like this in the middle of. After almost losing his 2 fingers, he asks if there is something wrong with Zipful. After all, none of them are healthy. So intercom announces that the teleportation will begin soon, and pain and fainting may occur due to the turbulence of the teleport to this. Baradinho calls Jin, saying he had fun today and says they will meet again someday. Moment, however, Jin denies it again, saying that he never wants to see him again, and upon arriving at his destination, Jin is received by butler named Petro, and he welcomes the boy to the main house of the Run Kandel clan, the Garden of Swords, and it is said that only those with achievements that have contributed to Run Kandel's prosperity are given the chance to placing their own sword in the Garden of Swords. Had said that this is a garden that symbolizes dream and honor of all Run Kandel, and it was also Jin's wish to put his sword there when he died, but his past life. He was weak, besides having no talent he couldn't lead, and he wasn't even intelligent, so he wonders how. He thought he could accomplish something just with work. Doru, he says that in this life he will make it worth it. Live in this shitty place. So once again he goes in front of his father and his other brothers, and his mother says that she already hasn't seen him in a long time, and she is called the Black Panther Rosa Run Kandel, the lady of the house, and he greets his mother. But in the meantime his father keeps an eye on the cat he has with him and asks if Jin caught the cat from the street, and he says he adopted him, but his father questions why the boy said he adopted him instead of caught him, so he says he liked the answer used, and says that Run Kandel must maintain such a posture when he gets something. So his mother asks, what is the cat's name? And he says it is Nabi Hun Kandel, but one of the brothers starts to freak out, saying that he understands that he is young, but this is wrong, and asks how dare the boy put Run Kandel's name in a viral hit. Then he asks how Jilly created Jin, letting him name a mere cat that way, and she can only apologize. Then his father tells him to stop and asks Jin why he named the cat Randall, and the boy just replies that it is so that he is responsible for it, because it may just be an animal, but as it is the first life he adopted, he feels that his name must carry a great weight, and his father says that this is interesting, but he asks if the boy knows the weight that the name Run Kandel there is, and the boy says yes, because if Nab hurts someone it means he has to pay the price. So his father says that Jin seems to have a talent for making enemies, given the way his brothers are looking at him, and the boy says he recognizes who has a talent for that, but says he also has a talent for killing his enemies, and his father says that everyone must already be at the limit, wanting to kill his youngest son without scruples. And then 4 years later, at the beginning of the summer of 1794, Jinu Kandel is already 14 years old. He is a 2-star knight, a low-rank cadet, and so the instructor speaks to. He says that his training is finished and says that he did a good job, and the boy asks if they are only going to train tomorrow, but he says that the training Miss Luna's appointment is scheduled for today, and asks if he forgot. Then Jin remembers and says he thinks he's going to eat it. Then, however, the waiter asks if he's going to eat with the cadets again, and says that Madame Rosa seems to be disappointed. But Jin says it's okay after all, he doesn't want to be part of the staring war with his brothers while he eats, and Garen understands this, saying that we'll forward the message to her. In the meantime, Bop brings Jin's food, and he says that Bop is a 13-year-old commoner, and soon he will be disqualified during training and stripped of his cadet entitlement and expelled. So he asks the boy if it tastes good, and he says yes, because he is always grateful to Arkandel for allowing him to eat meat regularly, and also he is grateful to the young man for always sharing his meat with him. This prevents the boy from stopping that. After all, he said that too, so he asks if he memorized any passages or something like that. He tells Bop that sometimes he needs to be concise. After all, people despise him because he always slows down when he's talking, and the boy is surprised by this, and Jin tells him to straighten your posture and be proud to be a guardian knight of the Run Kandel. But the boy says that his grades are down there, and he's not even a star yet, and Jin says that becoming a June Kandel cadet is a task very difficult, and even when they are in the lowest rank, and he tells the boy that he is elite compared to the others 13-year-old children around the world, and the boy just agrees, and Jim says he's not surprised his clan kicked him out. After all, this boy is very docile. However, he is surprised how this well of purity was for the Hiran clan, a clan different from Chinese Sword, and became the loyal dog of the Vermont Empire, and is said to have become a mass murderer without Pity and Jean says that when he heard that he became part of the Imperial Guard he was shocked and also sad. When he discovers that he is Autvask and he says that if he leaves Bope the way he is it will be bad, and Jean tells the boy, who is no longer hungry, giving him his food, and he thinks he will keep an eye on the boy so that he doesn't get disqualified and expelled this time. Because living a shitty life once is enough, and people think that the release of spiritual energy is in 2 stars and Sis is at 4 stars, but fencing is also at 2. He says everything is going great. Calmly, and at this rate he will be able to reach the 3-star Grima in 2 years, but before that. He meets with Luna and she says that today's training will be the same as yesterday's, but she reminds him that he needs to treat this training as something different every day. He says he understands, and she tells him to use his mind's eye and tells him to watch with him. But the boy keeps thinking that he's going to have to adapt to this training that he's never heard of before, and she tells him to look at it with his mind's eye. For those who live wielding a sword, learning to use the mind's eye is more important than any other thing, and she tells him not to open his eyes, but he thinks that the mind's eye is a state of enlightenment for Knight of 7 stars and up, but she wants to teach him that while he is only 2 stars, and he talks also that in addition the typical mind's eye usually looks like scattered aura, but his sister Luna is not using aura in his training, so he doesn't understand anything, but he changes his thinking and says he trusted her. So he's sure she has something in mind, so he'll just focus on training for now, and the day will come when that he will understand this training. And at the end of the training she says that he did very well and tells him to go back now, and she says that as expected I knew he would do well, but he always exceeds her expectations, and she says he has great concentration and posture that are not seen in 2-star knights, and she says that with this potential he will be able to understand. After a few years of this, she hopes that her little brother continues to evolve. So, with the cadets, everyone is tense. That's right. Said that that day's training fight will be worth most of the final score, and a good score there would be the quick way for him to become a guardian knight, so that's why everyone is tense, and it is also said that that day will be very important for Jin. After all, Madame Rosa said that if he manages to defeat all of the top 10, that day he will be able to move up to intermediate training next year, so Jean is happy about that and realizes what a bellope. He's like that again. He says it's no big deal after all, he's going to make sure the boy isn't expelled. But it still hurts that he is not at all confident, and the instructor warns that the fight that day will have 3 rounds and everyone will change partners every time, and in addition all the 10 best fighters will face Jin duels. That G notes that they are not bad at all, and they were not given the reason to become cadets for no reason, so at the end of the duels he separates the 10 people he selected, so he tells Jim to prepare, and the boy starts defeating easily him, and he thinks that the biggest record was 8 people, so he just needs to defeat 2 more, and he says that to do this he must be very careful with a specific opponent, so he goes to him, thinks that Misa Milk is an elite warrior who will complete all her cadet training in the future, immediately become a guardian knight. She says that she would be very happy to defeat him that day, and he thinks that the fight against the table is the most important of this test, and soon the 2 start brandishing their swords. He says that table is stronger than before, but it's still not like he can't defeat her, but he says that, however, the problem is that he has to defeat 8 more people after her, so he wants to end everything quickly. And she wonders why he is using simple attack all the time, because he always used different skill before. She asks why he would be doing this, and she thinks he is doing it on purpose, but she doesn't know what the reason is, and so she concludes that he thinks he won't be able to defeat him and thinks the boy is belittling him, so she stays and comes at him with everything, but the boy manages to fight back very well, and the table thinks he can't lose like that again and overcome the young master, this time going all out in an attack on top. But Jean breaks her sword. She remains asking how he did it, but he puts the sword to the girl's neck and says it was a great fight. He says that he won't be able to use that sword anymore, and she realizes that he did something incredible. As his swords collided several times, he continued, always attacking the same point of hers, and she thinks that they don't have that much difference in strength and resistance. Then she notices who lost because he lacks precision and persistence, and she asks how that would be possible and notes that actually being an Arcandel makes him different, and she tells him that she will train and will defeat him one day, and says that she can't just stand there and let him win every time, and Jim thinks it was the way he planned, because with his current self Dueling against 10 cadet is not such an easy task, and by winning the fight unilaterally against the table he gave the impression to everyone that they would lose if they fought him one by one, so he comes to the 10th combatant and says that, "I'm glad everything went well with this Gorgon," congratulates him, saying that this will help him have a real lesson. Ruck Kandel intermediary at the beginning of next year and congratulates the boy in advance, and Jean tells they want to take care of him until then, but he says it will be lunchtime soon, so he will finish training there. However, Jean asks how long they have until lunch, and the waiter says that they have about 10 minutes, so Jean says, "Who wants to fight someone?" and the boy asks who he has in mind, and then the boy shouts for Bop, and the boy is scared, wondering why. Then Jean calls him saying he wants to fight the boy, but Jean says that the only way for them to survive Run Kandel will be like this, and tell the boy to go and fight against him because he will destroy him like he was a piece of trash. Then Bop goes to the arena and wonders if Jean wants to fight him, and wonder if it's because he's weak or because he's trying to mold him, and Jean talks to the boy saying he's really tired of having fought against 10 cadet, and he, on the other hand, is doing very well. So despite that, he will be stronger than Bop, and that's why he wants to fight him, and the boy keeps wondering what that means, but Xing doesn't even give him space to think. Attacking him and attacking with everything, and Bop wonders why he's doing this, but Jay doesn't leave room for questions and continues attacking with everything and says that the boy is defending himself very well. Jean picks up rocks and hits the boy in the eye, making him temporarily unable to see. Meanwhile, he already comes with a trick trying to lift the kid, then B with red eyes after having been beaten a lot on the ground, and asks why his young mother is doing this to him, but Jean asks him if he thought he just called him for a duel, and he said he wanted to fight against the boy, and at that moment he says that he could have killed Bella, and he tells the boy to get up because he will show mercy only once. Then the boy gets up invoking his aura, and everyone is surprised by this is because the bope time has completely changed, so Misa tells the instructor that they need to stop with this is because the young master may be in danger, but Jim says that this is an order and asks everyone to keep what they saw it there in secret, and Garen agrees with this, and Belope asks if that is what his master wants, and Jean says, "What is that?" and if he knows how to use aura he shouldn't hold back, so the boy says he made a mistake because if he wanted to fight him he should do it before having fought 10 people. He attacks the boy again with a lot of fury, breaking the Jin sword in half, so he says that he didn't expect it to be at that level because he already knew that Bop would be very skilled, because whenever he fights another cadet he analyzes the skills and movement of his opponents, but he didn't expect that the boy could already use aura, and as the boy attacks her again he realizes that Bop always loses very narrowly, and Jean, even with his sword in pieces, attacks Bop again with a stump and attacks with his hand of the boy. While he feels pain at the sight of the blow, Jean grabs him, giving the boy a rear naked choke, almost putting him to sleep. Then while Bop crawls in front of him he asks why Jean stopped, as he thought he wanted fight for real and go to the end, so he asks if it's fun to play with people, but Jean says of course no, so the boy asks why he did that, but Jean says it hurts to try to stimulate people like that, and it's very more painful than he thinks, so the boy asks what Jean knows about him to torture him like that, and Jean says that, as he says, he doesn't know him very well, but he knows one thing, and he says that you can only show kindness when you are strong, and Bop is weaker than that. He is also kinder, and he likes that about the boy, but you can't survive in this hell just by being not useful. He tells Bope that he hopes he becomes strong enough to protect this feeling, and he and everyone there ask sorry for being Doro with him. In this the boy starts crying. The maids arriving with the food are surprised because the training isn't over yet, and asks if they should come back later, but Jean says it's okay. They can prepare lunch, and Bop in turn tells Jean that he can get his own food today, and Jean is happy, saying that he will also take the boy's portion of this, and goes directly to the patriarch to inform everything that Jean did, and his father starts to laugh, saying that he understands that this is the boy's belief. As he walks the path of a domineering, he will take care of the weak, and the patriarch thinks he will have to check if this belief has any value, so he sends C back and transmits this to him. He says that he will give the first mission to Jean, so in January 1795 he was recognized as a 3-star knight at the age of 15, and on their first vacation the cadets return to home. However, there are those who work on themselves with personal training, and he also says that when you move on to the intermediate class, instead of wooden swords they need to use a real sword that is good for He then some cadets asked for their own swords and he says that he also had to find a good sword for him in his clan's warehouse, but Luna appears to the boy saying that it was difficult and hard work to find a sword for him, and he says that his sister asked him to let her choose his sword a month ago when I was begging for it a lot, and the boy is not at all excited about this idea, and he says that she definitely has eyes better with the sword than he is, so he knows she will make a better choice than he would, but when she puts the sword on the ground, it's a gigantic sword the same size as her, and he's even scared by it, and she says that this is a sword that was once known as a ball massacre, and when she was his age she used it a lot. So she invented the Machado sword when she was the boy's age, and she says that you could say that this is the origin of the krant she uses now, and she asks if he liked it, but the boy says he is very grateful that she has it. Chose this sword for him, but it doesn't seem very right, so she starts to get sad, saying everything is fine. After all, it was just a joke, but he realizes that it definitely wasn't a joke, and she says that the Bay Massacre is. It's actually a very good sword, and it's a little heavy, but it shouldn't be a big deal. She keeps looking at it. He doesn't show much excitement, and then she says everything is fine and she's going to show him a different sword, so he says he thought a lot about this, what would be the most suitable sword for him, a sword that is only good for the boy. She says she thought about it. After all, how did he choose Bari's ADA in the selection ritual? She thought that would be the one best sword for him. He says that that sword is the sister of the Bariza that the first patriarch used, the Bradamanti, and she says he must like it, so he says of course after all this is an incredible sword even among the various swords. Master which clan of his owns, and he thinks that this mine sword he had to get no matter what, but his sister made the good by personally choosing the Bradamanti for him, and he says that the Bradamanti and the Barai's ADA are both swords that are best to use with spiritual energy, and he says that if he chose the sword himself he would have to give up because of the opposition of his other brothers. Then he says that Brad Mother is a sword that the other brothers also want, and because she chooses to, he doesn't know how he could pay her, but she says she doesn't need it, and also says that Jean still seems to be uncomfortable about her and it makes her sad, but he says it's not that, but she says she's already sad, and he goes. Having to console his big sister's broken heart, he asks her what she means by that, but she tells him to close his eyes as they will start his training, so she asks if he knows what she's going to say, and he confirms that he does, but now she's going to teach him one more thing, and he asks what it is, and she says that among the brothers who are busy trying to destroy each other, he also has brothers who love him unconditionally, and she tells him to make sure to record his heart again, and she also tells him not to let makes his sister sad again, and he starts to apologize once again, and she says that even before he was born she was lonely among her family, and she hopes he is not lonely like her, and that is why she is doing. She expects him to understand this, and she tells him to continue his training and tells him to see through the eyes of his wife. Lies, and after all this the boy goes to MONARCH and asks him what he thinks of that sword, so he tells him to put it away, because there is still a lot of control left, spirit. UAL from the boy, and he says that for the boy to use the Bradament properly he needs at least energy. 3-star spiritual, but he is still a 2-star kid, and he tells the boy that he can barely imitate the awakening of the sword, but the boy says he feels he is very close to the 3-star spiritual energy. He says he should be able to use it soon, so Murikan says that's a very arrogant attitude and sends the boy. Pay attention, after all, the Bariza and the Bradamanti are not swords that anyone can use just because they want to, and he says that 3-star spiritual energy is the minimum, and until he reaches at least 5-star spiritual energy. Stars use it just like a normal sword, so the boy tries to argue, saying that he's not that patient, and he asks what will happen if he reaches the 5-star spiritual level at the end of the year. Then Dragon. He starts to get pissed and says that even if someone who won first place in a children's spiritual energy contest and doesn't eat anything there, spiritual energy instead of food, wouldn't be able to do that, and he says he's saying that because he cares about the boy, and he says that from now on the boy shouldn't say things that would make even a dog laugh, so he asks if he understood and tells him not to be stubborn, but the boy takes the book he was reading and starts trying to tear it up, and asks what he was talking about being a child, so Murikan asks him to stop that and put the book down, but Jay gets there and he asks what happened, and she says that the Garen instructor is looking for him, and normally he would come in person, but he says the boy needs to go in person as he needs to explain the plan with the maps. So the boy wonders what plan he's talking about, and she says that's right. She says that the Garen instructor assigned her first mission, and he says that the boy will leave as soon as the holidays are over, and he is surprised but thinks it's time since he has reached the 3-star rating. But once the holidays are over, it's strange, and Jilly says that the missions are difficult. They are normally assigned to the intermediate class, and he says that maybe this is happening because his transfer was confirmed, so he says that it will happen. One look, you send Guile to wait with Murakin, then the boy goes to Waiter saying he heard he was assigned for a mission, and then Waiter greets the boy saying that a mission has been assigned to him and 9 other cadets. Beginner class, and it is said that he will lead this mission by splitting into 2 groups. It is an escort mission to around the southern border of the Kingdom of Zon, and the boy says that the Kingdom of Zon is close to the land of beastmen and the area marked is close to the territory of the White Wolf tribe, so he says it is a place that would not be sent to prison beginners anyway, and he also says that this is much earlier than usual and it is very difficult for a first mission, and he says that in his group there are cadets who are in the lower half of the class in terms of grades, and he also says that Bop has inconsistent notes, that it's almost like someone did it on purpose, and he thinks it's an order and thinks that his struggle with Bop has been forgotten by his father, so he wonders if this is his way of testing him. He says he's going to show his father clearly that his belief won't waver. Then, 4 days later, so Joshua's iPhone 3 says that the objective of the mission is to search for the successor of the Bill clan from the Kingdom of Zon without Br Bill, and as soon as they arrive they will organize the base camp in the central region of the frontier, and when they finish each division they will begin their search, and once a day they will send a man back to report they found, and Jean tells them to no longer call the boy young master but captain, so he says that the wounded will stay in camp and get enough rest, and that's all, and now they will wait for their alb. Be alive then. At the first stop, Bop says that he then saw a tribe of man-beasts, and Jean is impressed by this and says that these guys are the type that avoid predators and have docile personalities, so there is no danger in seeing members of the White Wolf tribe, and he tells Bop that his relocation will be delayed a little because of the snow, and so he tells the boy to go to the base 2 hours early and move to the 13th zone, and everyone else he tells him to look in the 13th zone. Then he says that there is something strange because this mission is directly under the orders of his father, but everything is going really well, and he says he thought this mission was for him to test, so he decided to asks if he's wrong, and these stupid beasts come to them saying that they look like Mingos and say that they feel sorry for the boys, giving them food as gifts, and Jean says that they will return the favor. At some point he says that if they pass the 13th zone they will be in the territory of beastmen, and as cadets, beginners of the training class, they are not equal against them. He says that there is no need to rush to get results, and he will finish investigating the rest of the area for the next 4 days. Then Bop arrives calling the boy and says that the 2nd Division was ambushed, and Jean tells them all to get ready to leave and asks how the situation is. He says that currently the 2nd Division split up while fleeing, and one of those who escaped arrived at the base camp reported to Hidge situation. Jean asks if the ambushers were beastmen, but Bop says no, they were human, and there were 3 of them, but with only 3 of them they won, and Jean says they didn't ambush them like that, they must. There are more people, so he tells Eddington and David to go back to the equipment and do the rounds of the place, and if they see enemies he forbids them to act, as they must first report directly to him, and he thinks there are too many entities to consider an ambush and asks what their objective is. After all, it's strange they attack the 2nd Division instead of the 1st, that where he is. Then he says that whoever it is he is going make them pay for messing with Run Candle, so they see blood on the way, and Bop is worried about the table. After all, she may be dead. But Jim tells him to calm down because the blood hasn't dried yet and there are no signs of bodies or pieces of human flesh, and he says that there was a fight there and the 2nd Division fled, and according to the footprints it was just one ambushers for used repose, and it looks like Hoofer's products. And then he asks where she found it, and he says he found it on the west side. He says that this means that the 2nd Division was ambushed and was undergoing treatment there, so they detected another ambushed and fled to the west. He orders Sierra to go to Eddington and David to report the current situation, and he calls Bope to go with him, and on the way they notice something and realize that it is the 2nd Division, and he says yes, but the table, it's not there, and besides there's another ambush. Now Jean tells Bope to close his eyes for a moment and, after 2 seconds, knock down the guy on your left. Then he thinks about a property of the spirit that Murakin him counted. Anything involved with spirit has its destructive and cutting power increased, and the presence of the object And if it slows down slowly it hits one of the men and Bop quickly appears on top of the other and he even tries to counterattack but Jean catches him from behind and when he falls Jean is in agony. Asks if they are okay and one of the boys says they are but they took the table they couldn't see their faces and Jean says that will do. And they should worry about reinvigorating themselves in this. He begins to wake up that man who was underneath him. So he asks for help, but Jean asks if the man wants to be spared and seeing how he cares about life itself, he can already say that he is not Zipfel's idiot subordinate so he says he will give him two choices. First they tell whoever they work for the objective and location of the base and only one of them dies and in the second they are silent and everyone dies including the one related to him. He says he is a man of his word and his name is Jean Hun Candel and he swears by the name and honor of his clan so the man understands and asks him to guarantee that his family survive and he says that he is part of a revolutionary organization known as Kin Zello so Shin says that Kin Zello is a terrorist organization that was active around the time of his death and he says he is sure they were killed by the Emperor of Zon and became known throughout the world for murdering and plundering citizens. They call it a revolutionary action organization but Kinalo's revolution is to make your own king become the king of the world. Then Jean asks if they attacked Randall Cadet to cause an uproar in Zon's kingdom and the man says he is only a low-ranking member so they didn't tell him much and even if he knows the location of the main base his camp is at the entrance to the Beastman's territory as they are approximately 20 knights and mages of for stars and then Jean asks one more thing they ask why they took the table he says that that is the statement from him that he says they needed it to declare their revolution that they were ordered to capture all the female cadets alive. One of the members gets very angry and Jean says he will keep his promise. And then he rips the guy's head off and he asks how long it has been since the table was hijacked so they say it will. It's been an hour and Jean says that they must still be at the entrance to the Beastman's territory and after recovering he asks the boys to go to the main house for help and he asks if Jinho is going alone. I go there and he says that the ambushers were all at least 4-star knights and he says he had around 20 of them and that's precisely why they say it will be impossible for him to take care of it alone. And one of them says that they are just cadets and death and missions happen often and asks him not to go. Regan says that what he said is really true, but in this situation where a cadet was taken as a prisoner, the son of a Hun Candel did not. He can do nothing then he says that he is much stronger than they think so he sends the boys to him. Obey, he will consider any questioning as disobedience and he tells Bell that since the entire second division is injured he is the strongest among all the remaining cadets so he must maintain his posture and be the leader. Of them he says that he will keep that in mind and soon the boy leaves there hoping that it is not too late to be able to recover the table. Then he thinks about the number of enemies and notices that he is on 3 styles in fencing, 4 styles on mana and 3 in spiritual release and thinks he is evolving quickly but doesn't know if he will be able to defeat everyone them at once and rescuing the table is his priority so he will fight as little as possible and focus completely on find her. In this he activates the seismic sense and says that he will also conjure a percutive wind there in ISO. He notes that they went through the plains and say that they haven't gotten very far yet, but while the boy was following ahead he is shot by an arrow but soon manages to escape. Then they notice a cadet from Run Candel and orders him to capture him because he uses magic to finish them all off and one of the guys wonders how Hun Candel is doing using magic so they try not to care about it, just kill the boy. But Jean easily turns the tables and starts to defeat several of them. Then the wizard asks everyone to get away from him as he is going to use magic. Magin can control his spell kills another one of the kidnappers. Then he goes up to the wizard and pulls him using his fire and the wizard. Note that if the fire doesn't work, he will pierce you with ice, launching several stakes, but Jean manages to use one barrier to stop him and the magician he doesn't understand how he manages to do this and how he manages to get through his spell but it's too late. He ends up running out of ideas for the answer and soon Jim realizes that the 15 don't seem intent on hiding their tracks and they wonder if they are belittling them perhaps because they have no real experience and he says that they got together with others and started riding in carriages so he says that Quintal is an organization that has a clear hierarchy and he says that there is a great chance that the spoils they catch would be distributed across levels since they wouldn't get their hands on loot intended for higher level people and that's the only chance they He still has to rescue the table, so he says that they are approaching the men's territory. Beast and their base is probably close by, in which case he will distract them and create an opening to rescue. The table then he casts magic on them, making a giant fire tea, and says that if he does that they will probably appear to put out the fire, and so it really happens. They start to wonder where that fire came from, asking to get water, and Jean notices a much larger man on top of one of the houses, saying that they can't even put out the fire properly and ordering the mages to cast magic. Ice and water. Then he realizes that the boss is there, but the fire doesn't want to go out, so while he lashes out at us other men, Jean appears behind him and simply Vasco Man. He finally finds the key that he will leave. As soon as he enters the dungeon, he goes looking for the table and notices a cellar and finds the girl down there in it. Asks why he's there, after all it's very dangerous, but he tells her not to worry about him. He asks if the girl can walk and she says yes, but he can't run with it. He says he will support the girl, but soon they hear a deafening sound, so she asks him promise her something, and she says that if things get really dangerous she wants him to abandon her because there is no one who can die there, and he says it is dangerous, so first they will get out of there, and when they get outside he sees a very catastrophic scene. He says that this is an act of beast men and they are clearly a tribe of warriors. Then they soon notice the cause of all that, the White Wolf tribe, and a gigantic wolf with a sledgehammer in his hand appears. So Mesa says he's going to buy him time and tells the boy to hurry up and run away, but he hits him in the back of the head, her making the girl faint. Then the White Wolf starts talking, calling the men worms and saying that they can't even put out the fire properly, and he says they don't deserve to stay alive, so he asks, "Ok, it was the brat who did it," and Jean says that he was the son of Soren Hun Kandel, Jean Hun Kandel, so he sends the Beastman, reveals his name, and the wolf in turn recognizes the name of the June Kandel, saying that he is one of the cubs of that family. And a few days before the mission in the main house of the Randall clan, Jay was training with his sword when his dark energy began to take over her, and the Murican arrived kicking him, calling the boy an idiot, asking if he wants to die. After all he thought he had left, of course he doesn't have a high enough level to try to awaken his sword without care, and he says that if he does that he will be caught in the spiritual energy congestion. He says that if he doesn't want to die because of this he shouldn't try to awaken his sword again, and so the boy agrees to. That's right. But in the current scenario he finds himself in front of a white wolf who is saying he's going to catch the most valuable prey in the world. Run Kandel family. He says his name is almost Utruka, a warrior from the Truka tribe who is talked about the wolf tribe. White, and they are said to be a tribe born for battle and slaughter, and the martial power of an adult white wolf is around the 6 stars, and the white wolf tribe is known to hate the June Kandel, and the reason is that the first patriarch of June Kandel killed the great white wolf Javier, who they worshipped as a god. So Jean realizes that he is going to. It would be impossible to try to escape from him with the table, so the wolf says he will offer it to Javier's altar later to console his soul, and the wolf tells him to choose whether he will have an honorable fight against him or whether he will be destroyed while tries to run away like a coward. But Jean says he will fight honorably, pulling out his sword, and then the wolf is happy, saying that he is a rum Kandel who knows honor, so he goes after the boy, saying that they are going to have a good fight. But he can only dodge that monstrous attack, and then when he hits him head on he stops the attack with his sword, but he says that as a member of the White Wolf tribe, it is very difficult to block a single attack, so they start exchanging more and more blows, but Jean thinks he can still win. After all, he has one more up his sleeve, and his enemy doesn't know, and he says he has his sister's pendant, magic, and spiritual energy, and he says it's not worth the trouble. It's a shame to wear the pendant in a small crisis like this, and if it can't solve a small problem like this it won't be worthy of being above others, and magic is also not the right thing to use there because only with 4-star magic it cannot. Manages to pierce the skin of a white wolf, and his clan sends people to investigate his zeal. The Knights Guardians will definitely find traces of magic, so he will end up exposed for breaking one of the rules of the clan, so he only has one option left, which would be spiritual energy. So when the wolf attacks again he speaks, who will awaken his sword, and the wolf tells Jean that he has a good sword, but he says that it doesn't match the symbol of the black sword, but it is still more resistant than it appears, so exchanging more and more blows, Jean continues to feel terrified. He remembers the feeling of the sword awakening that night. Then the wolf tells him that it's over because with this white sword he's going to sacrifice him at Javier's altar. But Jean can remember the sensation he had when he awakened the sword. So the wolf wonders what is that which is surrounded by a mass. Black woman who doesn't let him see anything while he's being chopped. Then he's split in half by Jean. He says that even recently he also didn't know that his clan's emblem was a black sword, and the wolf, with his abdomen open, calls the damn boy and asks what he did, but just responds that it was a good fight. Then a while later the boy is suffering a lot with spiritual convergence. After all, everything has a price, and several voices appear in the boy's head calling him damn useless and asking him what he plans to do with such pathetic skills. They say he's an idiot who has no sense of reality, and they say he's a disgrace to his clan, and he continues being tormented with memories of the past of his life where he was a failure, where his brothers said they had shame that they were born from the same mother. So the Murican appears in front of him asking if he hadn't given her. After all, when a child who doesn't have spiritual energy like him draws a sword, he will end up paying the price. And Murak ask if he is planning to die from spiritual energy congestion there, and he sends the boy wakes up because it will be the end if he lets his mind go, and he says he already told the boy what he needs. Then Jean begins to release spiritual energy and begins to feel that energy, which he says he can't do release properly because he continues to be distracted by the spiritual energy of the surroundings, but he can be distracted, and tries again, and so he slowly calms down and tries again and again and again until finally he manages to get rid of all the pain. He says that the pain disappeared immediately, which ended up making him a little nervous, but his body is always the same, but he feels that it is completely full of spiritual energy, and he also says that it is not having no problem walking, so he goes back to the table, but he asks who is there when he hears a noise, and a boy appears asking him to spare his life, and Jean soon asks if he is also a Kinelo, but the boy says no, and his name is Sem Burb from the Bil clan in the kingdom of Zon. Then Jean notices that the objective of his mission. He just appeared in front of him and said he was Jean Run Kandel, and he came to look for the boy, and the boy is completely happy after all, he is safe, and Jean says that he completely forgot about the boy because of Kinzeel group, and the boy starts saying that he will never forget his debt to Jean, and he says that it is not final at all, saying paid to do this, and now they're going to come back to it. He asks the boy how he was kidnapped by the group of 5 Zeal, and he says that he followed his loved one there, so Jim asks if they were running away, but the boy says that in fact the truth is that his beloved died 2 years ago, but the girl he was after was exactly the same from when she was alive, and he knows this may sound crazy, but it's true. He says there's no way he could have confused, so Jean starts to connect the dots, saying that everything was the same. This must be something Buvard Dagano Transformer. They say that they probably kidnapped CBR for money, and he starts asking if Bovard and the Kinelo group there is some kind of connection. He says this is the second time he has had contact with Buvard. He has a bad feeling, and he says he should meet Buvard in person to see what kind of guy he is. Then he thinks that the fragmented workshop that he runs should be in the capital of the Curano Duchy, and he says that it should try to find an opportunity while in intermediate training class. So the boy continues thanking NS. Jean says that his clan is sending him reinforcements, and the boy thinks Jean called the Knights Guardians to save him, but he thinks he went to the table, and the boy starts saying that he will always remember this meeting and tells Jean to come to him if he needs anything or his help, and Jean says he will do it. So now with Gilly, she congratulates him for completing his first mission and then puts him to take a shower because the boy must be tired. But Murak calls the boy very serious, and Jean tries to hide it by wanting to pet him. But the Murican bites the boy, and he throws the cat against the wall, and the Mana himself an addendum talking to don't mistreat animals, but Murak is a dragon, so he's fine with that. Jean asks why he bit him and the cat. He asks if he's crazy, and he says he thought it was so he wouldn't release spiritual energy, and he asks how many times did he warn, and also ask if he wanted to die. After all, that was a warning for his own good. But Jean asks him to listen, so he asks what he should listen to. After all, what else could be important than the life of the only welding contractor? So Gilly goes to the boy's aid, asking him to stop because he just came back. So Murican asks her to stay out of this. After all, this is a serious thing. And then Jean says that a cadet was kidnapped in front of his eyes and asked if he should just sit there and do nothing because he is worried that she would end up in big trouble. But Murican asks about his pendant and asks if it's just an accessory like that, which is just to hang around your neck, but the boy says it seems like a waste. After all, he doesn't know When he meets a much more powerful enemy, then the dragon freaks out when he talks about waste but ends up fixing your spine, and Jean asks if you're really that shocking. But a doubt arises, asking how he knows he awakened the sword, and Murikin says his spiritual energy jumped 3 stars to half of the 4 stars, and he asks how he could not notice, so Jim says he felt like he was left full of spiritual energy, but to think that he would climb a star, and Murikin just tells him that he should be grateful that I am Dire keeping him alive, and he says that of 10 people who have experienced energy congestion, spiritual or 11 now with him, 9 of them died, and then Jean says that he is probably the second, and he asks who would be the first, asking if he would be the first patriarch, but the dragon says he is wrong and it was he who survived. He also says that Timar would have died. So the boy notices that the 2 of them are not so indifferent and tells him not to worry. Because he doesn't want to suffer that pain anymore, so he says he's gonna wash, and Murikin gets even more upset, talking to Moreo's pie that she needs to make him starve until she learns her lesson, but she leaves saying that she needs to prepare the meal of the young master, and he lies there on the floor completely desolate at being left behind, and then 2 other people from the main house begin to wonder how it makes sense that Jean fought a warrior from the White Wolf tribe and won. However, another person says that it doesn't make sense and that maybe it was a bandit wearing a wolf skin, and they can't see it as a 3-star novice knight would kill the member of the White Wolf tribe, but the other says that he actually has a way it's supposed to be possible, that she says that the guy G-faced could be particularly weak, and that's an Hun Kandel, the clan's 9th flag bearer, and I say it still doesn't make any sense and is even more unbelievable than the mother only has CR-ite right away. Why? And agrees with this, asking the twins for if they also agree, and with all sure they nodded positively, and then Ratona asks if Jean would have really killed that wolf, and Ratona says that he could be a monster, but this exaggerates even for him, but he says that the problem is not if he killed really a member of the White Wolf tribe or not. Apparently he's going to the intermediate class now, and they think that it will end for them if he comes to the same class, and then they get depressed about it, and his sister calls him an idiot, asking they are both whispering, wondering if they are that scared of Jin going to intermediate class, and they deny it vehemently, but Mi says that they can be honest in front of their big sisters, and she says that is the best, because what she hates most are liars' tongues, because it makes her want to rip them out, and they soon confess that they are very scared of Jean. Yan asks if they want their sister's help, and they ask how she would help. She says that she will specially lend her slaves for them to use, and it is said that the intermediate class of the June Kandel is purely survival of the most abito. It is made up of a broad spectrum of cadets from 3 to 5 stars, and there are both newly entered cadets and cadets who have been stuck in the class for 10 years, and Mi and Yen got some of these cadets who couldn't climb, and they abuse them as their slaves, and she says they can catch him and finish off Jim, because she also has a bad feeling about the boy, but she says that if they don't take care of it properly, it's better be prepared for the consequences. Meanwhile, Jim thinks that since he was successful in his first mission, his promotion to the intermediate class is certain, and furthermore he has achieved 4-star spiritual energy, and in order to properly extract his spiritual energy he needs to achieve the swordsmanship of stars within a maximum of 5 years. He says that the swordsmanship of 6 stars means he is an excellent swordsman, and starting at 7 stars he enters the rank of a master Patachinos, but these are special brands just for normal people, and starting with 8 stars to person is considered irregular, and things change completely, and then there are not even 100 stars and 10 stars among the 2 billion people on the entire continent, and only one person surpassed this standard entirely, the demigod realm, the Gentleman Genesis, and he thinks that in this life he will reach the Genesis rank or go up to. Furthermore, he says that the first bridge to cross would be his promotion, and the Gitana are in the intermediate class, so he says he already knows. Even if he hasn't experienced it, as soon as he enters the intermediate class, his brothers, not only the Gemstona, will try to keep him under control, and he says that the beginner class is full of young kids of similar level, so it had a friendly atmosphere, but in the intermediate class being soft won't work, and there is a place where only strengths and skills work, and he only has one job. He will have to dominate the intermediate class with power, and already in her mother's room Jean goes to see her, and she says that she heard that he completed his mission safely, and says that he had excellent results. He thanks his mother. She says that according to the report he received from Petro, he refused the suggestion to change rooms, and she says that like the boy, that room is only allowed for those who can become the future patriarch, and it has been empty since Joshua used it when he was a child, and she says that, I would like him to use it now, so he thanks him, but he says he will have to refuse. She asks him why. Which may be a great room, but at the end of the day it's just a room, and to him the room seems a little too much, so she asks if he really doesn't want the room, and he says he's already decided. And she tells him to go away, then he leaves. She says she can't tell if her youngest son is very anxious or not because the room she suggested is the room of the eldest, a room only allowed for the child who will be responsible for the June candle in the future, and he must know that the moment he steps there he will have the support that the room deserves, but at the same time he will be the target of all kids who didn't get the room, so she feels like he must have realized she was testing him, and she says that now she wants to see how he does in the intermediate class, and with the cadets Jim says starting tomorrow he will be in the intermediate class, and that place has different types of factions. He says they will be seen like his faction, and they will have to put up with all kinds of insults and torments, but they should not fear because he will not just leave it, and they will stop once he manages to completely conquer the intermediate class, and until then, they must stay in a group of 3 until outside training time. Avoid walking around alone so they can understand the message. So already in the intermediate class Zed Run Kandel talks to everyone, and he says that 10 newbies will join to them this year, and 27 apprentices dropped out, and the newcomers must learn the lifestyle of a cadet intermediary with his veterans, and he says that his only job is to teach and judge their swordsmanship, and except for murder, any situations or incidents must be resolved between themselves. In that Zed ask the elders what he always preaches. They say that the June candle don't need the weak ones. They begin to warmly repeat this several times, all to intimidate the newbies, and Jean thinks they are being noisy, that is full of malice to try to overthrow their will, and he realizes that even his brothers for there, and he notices that the guy next to them must be a cadet from a long time ago, and he doubts they have a recruited, and he wonders if they are getting help from their older sisters Me and Anne, and he says they have. I'm sure their intention was to destroy the newcomer's self-esteem, but then he should show that they are very deceived, and he simply starts walking around wielding his sword, and the twins start asking why he is going to them, and they force themselves not to be yellow because now they have the support of their older sisters, but Jean takes out his sword and cuts off the hand of that cadet borrowed from the sisters, and everyone is incredulous at this, even Zed and him. He doesn't even realize that he lost his hand until he sees her, and Kano falls on the floor screaming in pain, and Jean thinks who should take careful, it's them and not himself, and then Tana asks if Jean has gone crazy and asks why he suddenly used his sword, but Jean simply asks what that cadet's name is, and he says Circa Jean Romulo, and Jean asks if he knows why he cut him off, but in the middle of their conversation, he asks if he's ignoring him and sends him draw his sword again, but Jean looks at them and asks if they can't see what he's talking to Kajin now, and he says he'll accept with pleasure a duel later, so he tells them to keep quiet for now, but Ratona starts calling him a bastard and starts asking how he dares Gur like that after cutting his cadet, and when he realizes that he said nonsense he immediately stops, but Jim asks what he means by his cadet, so he asks again, asking if that friend over there was ignoring his older brother's faction, and he says he simply cut him off because he felt bloodlust in the way he was there looking, so everyone around notices that this is a battle for hegemony. And Zad realizes that while they were trying to destroy his little brother's self-esteem, instead they learned to lesson. He says that Grace of the Tana brothers Kajin became part of the Tana brothers faction publicly, so the actions of Jean were not taken as random but instead became part of Randall's long tradition, the battle for hegemony, and he did something really bold. He tells all the Kaditos to listen because he is Jean Rum Candeli. He says that they can point their swords at him or even try to ambush him just like now, however he tell them to be aware because if they show even the slightest hostility, he won't hesitate to cut them off like that. Like he just did in this. Zed calls Jean by his full title, and he asks if the boy thinks he can act like that in front of him, and the boy says yes, and Zad asks why, and Jean says he doesn't think he fought against his older brothers. But against the old man, and Zad realizes that he is saying something very interesting there and imposes his sword, thus telling the boy to explain himself, and depending on his answer he could cut off his head there. Now Jim says, even though he is part of the cadets, he refuses the intermediate class to do his hazing, so the boy reads, I'll do it like, An attack from Zed, and Zed starts to swing his sword, but Jean doesn't even move, receiving only a light cut on his cheek, and Zad asks if he has a problem with that. After all, he's causing a commotion just because he didn't like him having. When instigated by the prank, Mazim says it's true because he wasn't the least bit displeased. It's like Zed said. Then the instructor asks why he cut a cadet instead of pointing his sword at him, and Jim says it's because he still can't defeat him, because if he thought he had a chance against him instead of Kajim or of the brothers, he would have cut Zed himself, and he says that the boy doesn't seem to value his life, or he overestimates his position as the patriarch's son. But Jean denies this second option, saying that he simply considered this because he is a much stronger opponent, and this does not correspond to the values of a Humkandel Isad. Ask if he is saying that a life can be taken in the blink of an eye but honor lasts forever, so he says that the boy is very foolish, and he calls his reason Tosco, but this reason made his uncle happy, so he says he recognizes the boy and says he is worthy of living as a Run Kandel, and tells the rest of the cadets not to worry. Forget what they saw today, because they saw with their own eyes a Hun Kandel, and he says that what the boy showed is their true identity as demons of the sword. He orders the cadets to be crowded all day and not to forget their identities, so he says they are dismissed and the real training will start tomorrow, and the Tana twins are not happy about this. But G gives them some advice, saying that now they can. Finds his older sister scary, but he asks if it will be like this forever, and he sends the boys not just see what is in front of them but think about the consequences as they choose their actions. And when Jean returns to his quarters, he tells Jill that he has started a battle for hegemony with his brothers Anna, and he says that it seems that behind the Anna brothers are the older sisters, and Mio and Jay asks if he is sure of this, and he says he cut a cadet who was with them, but seeing this he was part of the factions of the sisters, but thanks to his brother's mistake, he is now part of the brothers' faction. He bets that N and Mio will stay. When they find out, he says that, to begin with, there's no way the brothers would have a 5-horse knight stars as an underling, and he says that normally boys only pick up people weaker than him, so G understands that the two are acting as flag bearers, and she says that it is an implicit rule for flag bearers to only fight against other doors flags, and Jean says it's okay because the fact that his sisters are trying to keep an eye on him is a good thing. News to the boy, and he says that he managed to give them a big blow today, and says that it's not like they could come to intimidate them personally since they are both flag bearers, and he says that the best they can do is probably to use your authorities as flag bearers to change the schedule and difficulty of your missions so that he is more likely to die or at least be injured, but missions with high difficulty, several of them are individual, and these missions mean that there will be no one watching him, and this also means that he will be able to freely use all his powers during them, so Gilly thinks that this is actually a good thing. Opportunity, and the boy says that's it. He just has to thank his older sisters while he accumulates achievements. And besides, he says that it won't be a problem if he takes a cat with him, but he tells Murikin that he won't take him on missions because he needs him to do something else. He will tell him later, but asks that until then the two of them be discreet, and the two agree to this, and the next day Zed tells the three that from now on, after the morning training, they will receive special training in this secret boot camp intended just for the pureblood Kandel run, and he says it's a special right for them purebloods, but he also says so they don't expect it to be easy, and he says that his clan's grima is like tyranny. It's destructive and merciless battle. And Lut Hun Kandel's personality is directly reflected in his swordsmanship, and furthermore, his clan's swordsmanship has no specific ways. They have secret techniques and decisive moves to kill, but they still need to become bear flags to learn them. While Zad talks, Jean thinks they must have taken a hit from 1000 IED. Continues saying that this is an ethereal swordsmanship without technical step rules or even an adequate form, and this is the biggest defining characteristic that separates him from the other martial clans, and so he asks if they know what sets him apart. Fencing. It has no form, and Jean says it is because of the physical capacity and specific senses of the Run lineage. Kandel Izd says that this is exactly what he says, that the Run Kandel are a blessed lineage that has a body that nor can they compare with normal humans. They are born with an incredible talent for swordsmanship, and there may be differences in terms of individual skills, but each Run Kandel has it, and he says that what they have to learn is stupidly simple, and he tells each of them to lift a steel ball, and Jean wonders what that is. noticing that there is something in there, and he asks if it's a piece of metal, and Zad says he calls those things clear stones, and Zad says that they have that name because when it's time they produce a clear sound, and then Zad says that now he must let them listen to the 3 different sounds of these stones and tells them to listen carefully, and then he gives the first blow that leaves the boys a bit distressed, and he says that that sound is quite unpleasant, so he gives the next blow a much calmer sound. Then he says that as they heard the stone Clara makes sounds different depending on how hard you hit it. He says that when it hits softly it makes a blurred sound, and when it hits with the right force it produces a beautiful sound, and Jay understands this, saying that it will make a clear sound depending on the way you hit it. He says it is a training to increase strength, control, mentality, and focus, and he says that thinking about physical abilities, natural results of a run candle is good and simple plus direct training, and he says that in the end you just have to hit a rock repeatedly, and says that it lacks the danger to be called run candle secret training. And then Zad monster, or a sound that comes out of the stone raising his sword high ready to hit the stone, and G is wondering what the third one is. Sound, because there was definitely a sound echoing inside the stone. It seemed like it was a mental sound, but when Zed was hitting the rock, Jim notices something and then asks the brothers to get down, and when the rock is hit it cracks and creates a gigantic explosion in the place. And of note, that seems like the youngest has a good intuition, and he says that's it. Even the clear stones are set to explode once you apply too much force, and he says that the 3 are the first after Luna to not be injured after that explosion, since most of his brothers learned from this unsophisticated demonstration is a rite of passage, but Zad says he didn't expect to see another elegant child. However, Jean asks him a question wanting to know how Luna deviated, and Zad asks if he would feel bad then. Listen, just like all the other older brothers, but Jim says it's okay, so Zed says that, to be exact, Luna couldn't dodge like him, like the other children. She was hit by the explosion, but she simply couldn't. He got hurt because he was too strong, and seeing the look on his face, he says that anyway, the 3 of them of today, they will hit clear stones every afternoon. They will always hit no matter the circumstances until can hear a clear sound. And with Luna's, the nanny brings up the subject she said in the past, and Luna realizes that it was about the murder of her brother Jinho, and the nanny says that it hurts her mother, and in seeing how they were aware of the young master recently, she says that she has a great chance, but Luna says that they can act recklessly. But by no means are they crazy enough to attempt murder inside Storm's castle because it is forbidden to start a battle for hegemony against the Archandel, who has not yet left the Storm Castle. Furthermore, if these plans reached your father's ears, the house would be turned upside down, and even their lives would be in danger. And the nanny asks if there is a possibility that Jean would have made a mistake, since he had only 10 years at that time, and she believes that both cases could have been true, and Luna says that in fact they've been investigating for 5 years but haven't found anything, and she doesn't think Jean would have lied, but anyway. At that time the youngest was on guard against her, and she says that this may not have been because he purely felt a threat to her life, but because of human instinct, and she says it seemed like that, so the nanny asks if she should investigate first. And then Luna says that yes, she will leave it to her, but she says that instead she is more worried because she hasn't had any results so far. It gives her a bad feeling, but the nanny says it's her who should be worried. After all, Luna is going to be hurt by her younger brothers, but she says it's been a long time since she passed 30. She doesn't need to worry so much about herself. She says that anyway. She asks if Jin is doing well, and then the nanny asks if it's about Zed's training, and she says, and yes, because it is time. Del shows her the results of the mind's eye training, and she says that it will hurt a little to be hit by the Clara stones, but she's sure he'll do well, and she also says it's fun to see him grow. So in the next day, at the beginning of the 4 hours of training, he starts to think that this training, among the others he has done to date, is what makes him feel more shit on this. Zed gives them a 5-minute break. Regan says he thought it was training to learn to control strength and will, but that was not the case, and from the beginning he must prioritize increasing the destructive force of his aura. While his uncle was able to break Clara's foot without using his aura, because he lacks brute strength, he must train his aura to compensate for this lack of strength, and he needs to train his aura to hear the Claro sound and also break the stone. However, he says he won't rush. He'll take his time, and it's something that even those immature brothers achieved in their past lives. He says that then that means there can't be any way he can't make it, and Zed thinks that all 3 of them aren't coming out badly and holding on, but Jean is exceptional and he says that he should be able to break Luna's record and already. At night Zed is disappointed, calling his brothers pathetic and tells Jean to leave a message with them because if they plan to pass out tomorrow too, they shouldn't even come. Im says that the Tun brothers lasted more than expected, and in the end a Hun Kandel is still a Run Kandel. Rag in turn thinks about the youngest after all the people for that the youngest, if he had only been born 10 years earlier, he would be a talent capable of swallowing the Hun clan Kandel, and he says that no matter how much he thinks about it, it's a shame. And the month later, in March 1795, from the camp of intermediate training, it is said that the first mission of the year for the intermediate class has been issued, and the cadets, those called, must take a step forward, and the first mission is an escort, and the commissioners they must protect are the newcomers of the Minch Blacksmithing Association, and he starts to dictate the group, and the third mission is a subjugation of monsters, and they say that the targets of the subjugation are orcs, and the mission will be in an unprotected area of the Kurano Duchy. And the group, he says, will be a table Bill Up, Scott Diamonds, Kiko Zen, Eddington Sierra, Phils, and David the 10 mentioned. Then he says that in total he has 25 HS, and he says that the HS have a tendency to go in groups systematically, and he tells them to sort themselves out and take on the mission. He says that this is all, and Petro will inform more about the details and wish them good luck, but everyone remains scared. After all, they are sending newbies to subdue orcs, so half of them will come back dead, and everyone starts laughing them, and that guy starts saying that they still have time to write a will, or they can just say for Master Jean to save them because they are scared. And when one of them tries to fight back, he tells him to hold on tight because they are not yet as skilled as they can face her head on, and she says that because it is before the mission it will be even more problematic if he gets hurt. But the boy continues trying to defend the young master, but she orders he shuts up and stays quiet, and asks if he has forgotten that he is in the Run Kandel clan. They must perform the missions they receive and return after completing them successfully, and this is the only way to lower their ball. And during training, Heian ends up hitting the ball very hard, and the ball explodes on all of them, and Dayton almost hit Jean. In turn receives the impact, and Ratona asks if his brother is okay, but Jean only asks for them do this away from him, and when the two walk away, he thinks that it's been a month since they started training with the Clara stones, and they started to explode them now. He thought it would take longer, but he thinks about the feeling that he felt almost now. He says that it was as if he could see the trajectory of the steel sphere coming towards him, and he says, which was a clear sensation as if it were an arrow coming towards him. He says that if another steel sphere came flying, even he thinks he could definitely dodge it. He also asks if this feeling could be related to the training he had with his sister Luna, and he plans to continue before he forgets this feeling. But Zed says that he received missions, and then the brothers start crying because they have to go for an event. He wonders why it always has to be in the Vermont Empire. He says he is already sick and bored. After all, they hate formal clothes because they are too stuffy. But their uncle just gives his condolences and says that, thanks to him, his brothers don't have to dance at the Empire's party. However, it may be at the event, but it's still a mission. He asks why they are sending him. He says that if he shows this attitude one more time, he will show what it's like to really want being dead, and the boys soon apologize, and Jean thinks that the Zani Mayo sisters are cruel, sending the two who are bad at conversation to a social event in Vermont to punish them. Isad says it's a big event that even the Randall clan can't ignore, so he is sure they will have some strong people from vacation there, and he tells the boys to take a look at them because they might learn something, and they both respond positively. He says that as for Jean, he will have another mission, and he says it is an assassination, and he says the target is the little tailor's toy, the master of the hidden palace, in other words, is one of his many lovers, and he asks if the boy knows about the hidden palace and his master. The boy says yes and explains that the hidden palace refers to a massive tower in the middle of the sea in the west of the continent, and the owner of this tower is called the Master of the Hidden Palace and is currently the 51st Talaris N. Dorma Master, and she is someone known as Abyssal Spider, and they say that she is famous for being cruel to anyone who touches her lover. And Zad says that the Hidden Palace is a faction that is outside the influence of June Kandel and Zipfel, and he says that this should give the Jean an idea to comfort the Hidden Palace and his masteress. He tells the boy that his target is Alcaro Zengler E. He says that he is currently being protected by a palace agent and is residing in Mummet, the lawless zone, and the Gemos are scared by this, saying that missions in Mummet are usually given to guardian knights, so the Jim says he has a question for his uncle, and he says the client is Zadlander's clan, and he asks if it's true that PR itself, the clan is asking for the murder of one of them, and his uncle says it's true. It seems that the Setlander tried all kinds of things to get him back but failed, so they considered it better to kill him than to leak the clan's secrets, and he asks the boy if he thinks that he will be able to accomplish this mission, and the boy simply responds that he will be able to, so Zad is left wondering where the boy's confidence comes from. Boy, after all, he must know about here with 11th Master and Mummet, and yet he says yes immediately, and he says that he thought he would have to talk to the flag bearers if he thought it was unfair, but he simply tells Jean that he liked his answer and tells the three that they are going to leave in 2 days, and the guy gets scared asking if Jean is really going to go. Mummet and his uncle says that there is no reason to stop him when he wants to go. They say that they will pause the night training until the mission and tells the boys to only do enough personal training so as not to affect their missions and the twins. They will talk to Jean, saying that if things really get bad he should just reveal that he is a run candle, and so no one will be able to mess with him, but Jim is impressed that they are worried about him, but neither are they. Noticed that they were doing this, they said they just didn't want the boy to die before they had a chance to crush him, and Jean told them both that until he comes back he hopes they have made up their minds, so he hits that ball making a beautiful sound, and they are surprised, and Jim tells them to decide if they prefer him or his older sisters, and Zed talks to them both, reaffirming what Jean said, telling them to prepare their minds and not challenge him until they are strong enough. That's enough if they want to live for a long time. Then 2 days later the cadets go to Jean saying that they say that he is going to Mummet, the lawless zone. They soon realize that Jean has changed the color of his hair. He says that they are disguised because they can't find out he's a run candle, and he says that since they're on another mission they're going to use a transfer gate. Different, and he asks the cadets if they have a subjugation mission, and the table says yes, but Jim notices that they have a very dark face, and he asks what happened, but Mesa says it's nothing and says he just wanted to give it to God before he left, so he asks why it's God. After all, this won't be the last time, but the table says he's sure one of them will die if has bad luck. But Jean says that worrying won't change anything, so they should focus on their missions, and tells them that he will come back alive, and tells them to avoid getting hurt too much, so Bap tells him to be careful, and so they say goodbye, and Murikan arrives saying that he has some cute friends, so Jean asks him to protect the boys, and Murikan say he will definitely do this, after all he is the great black dragon, but Jean orders him not be discovered or else be obvious, but Murikan gets very angry, telling him not to expose if he falls apart if he finds himself against. He lets his guard down and says it's leaking, and Gil says that since Murikan won't be there he'll stay very quiet for a while time, and he tells her to see it as a vacation and Wingman who will bring souvenirs on the way back, and she says that it is still a murder against the lover of the master of the hidden palace, and this worries him, and she says that she knows he is not like an intermediate cadet. Normal, but Mummet is still a dangerous place, and she tells him to be careful, and the boy says he's going to leave and that now come back, then explain a little about Mummet. The lawless zone is a land where the dirtiest criminals gather, right? A somewhat rude guy arrives saying he's new in town and asks them to say hello to him, and everyone recognize that guy and say that it is a sanctuary for lawless criminals and is said to radiate energy of those lawless criminals. And then Jean arrives at the place with a very closed face, and they say that this energy that runs through there, he doesn't even let weeds grow, and soon everyone notices that boy and realizes that they have meet new there, and the boy simply asks for cold water and something simple to eat, and everyone says he's a boy bold, and that same guy in front of him asks if he's not acting too pompous for a newbie and asks who he is, asking if he is a renegade 9-star knight, so he puts his hand on Jin's shoulder and says that if he is a newbie at Mummet, he thinks he should know a little more about his rules by ordering Jean to kneel with calm down and lick your foot, but the boy just kills him right away and asks the attendant how long he has been planning to make him wait, and contrary to what should happen, everyone starts laughing, saying that he really died and saying that he already imagined that this would happen at one time or another, and Jean thinks that just like his master said, this place is full of crazy people, and to be accepted by lawless criminals he needs to demonstrate courage and enough skill, and that's what she told her, and she says that it was a great help in her past life and in this, and hopes that one day he will be able to repay his master, and the attendant soon brings his food saying that he did not poison it. Mazim says that poison is prohibited in this city. At least he knows that, and the attendant notices that the boy is well informed and asks if he has family there. But Jean says it's none of his business, and the attendant asks again what he wants, asking if the boy wants drugs and says they have good ones and that they are running out very quickly, or if he is looking for someone. So Jean says it's the last option, and Jean asks if by chance there's someone called Hisa's there. But the attendant, he says no and that he's sure about it. So Jim asks if he can suggest a place to spend the night, preferably one that isn't crowded, of insects crawling around, and then the guy says there's a place that perfectly fits that criteria. It's a inn called Moonlit Pulse on the west side of town. He says this place is where the king of Mummet stays, so he won't get into trouble like he did there, and soon he arrives at that inn and thinks that Al-Karat Zenler is the son. Rubbish from H. Condé, who grew up protected without knowing what difficulty is, and he is crazy about pleasure and fun. He says that the guy has nothing but lineage and a pretty face, and says he is a scoundrel who is weak to the strong and strong with the weak, and the reason he is staying in the dangerous city is probably to get the attention of the mother from the hidden palace, who is worried about a new lover, so this is the only place he would be. And he remembers that the guy from Aints said he had a new drug in him, so there's a big chance that guy is on drugs in his room, and since he is one of the lovers of the master of the hidden palace, he is sure he must have bodyguards. So he should assess the situation in the room to begin with. Then the man starts shouting, asking why he is saying he can't, and he says his guard had no problem getting him some yesterday, and in turn, he thinks it must be his lucky day because he found him right away, so his target starts to argue with his guard, asking for more and more drugs. He says he can't because he needs to remember for his job is to protect him, but the man tells him to shut up and doesn't want to hear another peep, and tells his guard to go get more drugs, and says that if he can't stop, he has a plan, saying that as soon as they come back their heads will be ripped off. That's what the guard starts to sigh and looks at the man behind him, and then punches that guy in the stomach, putting him to sleep. Then he wonders how long they will have to protect that piece of shit, and says that I wanted him to get screwed and die in his shitty addiction. And then he asks why Mia is. I understand he's alive, but the other guy tells him to keep quiet because his job is just to follow what was said without emotion. Zine realizes that his guards seem to be massive artists, and at least 6 stars, and killing Al-Karo seems to be easy, but problem comes after that because he needs to find a way to take the guy out and kill him without getting caught by the guards. He says using poison. It's a taboo there, and if he kills him like that, the whole Mamite will go to war, but his guards are on the way to kill him straight, so he starts thinking of a way to kill Al-Karo discreetly in the moonlit well, and soon he decides what he is going to do. And the next morning another group starts asking how many men he has as bodyguards, and they say there are 6 people, and the girl who appears to be the leader of this group laments that they are working hard because of a fool who doesn't know her place. But the man says that today, at the end of this, since she came in person, she will make things easier for them, and she says she can kill a guy like him whenever you want, and ask if he really was in the illuminated well as they said, and tell him. They hurry up, but a thundercloud starts to gather in the sky, and she says that good news must be sent quickly, but that thundercloud produces lightning that falls on the moonlit poo and destroys everything. And seeing that destruction, the girl realizes that choosing a bad day to appear there, and returning to Jim, he outlines his plan, saying that he will terrorize the moonlit well with his magic from his room, and he says that it is a 4-star, but if he puts his spiritual energy into it, he can create level 6 destruction stars, and with this type of spell they will be sure that it is an act of at least a 6-star mage, and he asks who would suspect that a 15-year-old boy is a 6-star magus. He says he doesn't have a single person, and even Jean Zipfel just became a 6-star mage, and because of the special energy trait, there will be nothing indicating that he was the one who used the spell. He says that there will be no way for anyone to suspect, and to make the attack look like it came from outside, summoning lightning will probably be the best spell for this. And then he starts releasing spiritual energy and takes over that whole room with darkness, and thinks that he really had a pretty scary plan, and he soon summons his lightning, destroying everything for his sake. Front, and in turn Cirrus Andidorma sees everything from the front, and his guard says that it looks like someone from the well lit by the Lua Enforcer is a high-level mage, and she says that this could be the case, but it could also be an attack against the palace. Hidden after all, there are 6 people in the inn, not to mention Al-Karo, her mother's lover, who is also there, so she Tell them to go quickly because she doesn't care what happens to Alcaro, but they must prioritize the condition of their children. Men, but as she ran she sees another lightning falling there, and all the people start to leave asking who was doing that, and one of them talks to a man who said he had killed one of the Zipful wizard's aunts, and he soon thinks they're getting revenge for this, but he says he invented that shit, and when will one more of those lightning bolts comes towards that girl's subordinate, she manages to stop the attack, and he is left wondering what is happening. And she in turn notices the strength of that impact and thinks it must have been the last attack, so he agrees with that, and she hopes everyone is safe and the psychopath inside is being hit by his own attack, thinks that maybe because of the final lightning that was imbued with his spiritual magic and it was so strong, which seemed like an attack of almost 7 stars, he says that he managed to avoid injuries thanks to his pendant, and he also notices that all the guards of the hidden palace seem to be safe, but he asks where is the might, and he thinks that if he's alive this might be his chance, but then Siri comes close to him and notices that there's someone his age in Mummet and asks if he is okay as the boy was also caught in that attack. And she tells him to get up and get out of there quickly. Then one of her men comes close to her saying that everyone is there and they are a little injured but they are all alive, and she says this is good news, calling them out, and if they are still defending the crab, Might tells them to kill him, so he obeys this, and she says that all spells were similar, so it was definitely a one-person thing, and if he finds the wizard she tells him to tie it up immediately, and Jean recognizes the girl as the daughter of the master of the hidden palace and playing for conversation with her. He soon concludes that it seems that she came to take care of the Might, and he thinks that since he is destined to dies he no longer has to go after him. He says that the problem is what comes after, because it will be problematic if he remembers his face. He says he will hide it as much as he can while he escapes in the middle of the confusion. Cirrus men am talking to her saying that Alcaro died in the attack and they failed as bodyguards, but she says this is good news, and she says she came to free them from this duty and says it was a good job taking care of that idiot for so long, and in this she says that the hidden palace will take control of the inn in the moment and announces herself as Cirrus Indorma, the daughter of tailors, the master of the hidden palace and captain of the 7 swords of the hidden palace, and she says that anyone who challenges them will be considered an enemy of the hidden palace. But the man tells her to stop clowning because even though she is the daughter of the hidden palace there, she is a mummet, and they say that too. The hidden palace take control of the situation over Rio de Sedade. They are overstepping their authority, and they also say that there is even a chance that he was attacked because of them, so the girl gets serious and soon goes after the 2, decapitating them, and she says that it was clear that anyone who challenged them would be considered a enemy, and asks about King of M, and she questions if they can underestimate the hidden palace just because they pretended to be kings of a den of bums, and she says that if it was revealed that this terrorist attack was directed at hidden palace they will repay appropriately. However, if the wizard is one of them and the hidden palace was pig in the meanwhile, she asks what they are going to do because she thinks this is reason enough for them to control this place, so they let her do whatever she wants because they are also trying to find and kill the wizard who did it. And she says that's what she thought, so she tells them to find the wizard who attacked the inn inside Survivor, but they say it's not one of them because there's no wizard there, but she says she's not surprised, but there's a chance that one of them ended up angering the wizard by causing confusion in that place, and she tells them to stop. He resists uselessly, and she says that as soon as she asks why the boy is being so slow and if he doesn't heard when he told him to leave, but he says he was a little scared, and not to mention that he injured his leg, and apologizes to her, and the girl says that he's a huge coward for the man, although he's handsome for a swordsman. So she pulls out an ointment and asks him to pull down his pants, and she says that he is lucky to have survived that attack, and also says that he is very lucky to have her passing medicine on them to great beings, and tells him to think about it with great honor, so he asks how he can return this favor, but she smiles at him saying that she doesn't need to. After all, how could someone like him return a favor to a great person like her? And she tells him to just consider it as a good memory, and from time to time she tells him to bow towards the hidden palace and says goodbye to the boy. He stays behind smiling, falsely thinking that his mission was completed, while Jean is putting a monstrous Miguel on top of that girl from the palace. I see the cadets continue killing the flowers and notice that they have already killed 18, and notice that maybe they manage to return without any of them dying, and everyone is happy, but the table tells them not to let their guard down because there are still 7 orcs left, so they come to their senses, and she says that orcs are normally well organized, and if they move in groups and them walking alone makes things easier, it's as if the gods are taking care of them, that she says that either it's that or the young master has the blessing of a god, and this luck ended up falling on them too, so she tells. They go explore again and stay focused and don't let their guard down, so in the meantime Murican keeps watching them from the middle of the woods and says that there is only one S left, and as soon as they defeat S he can go home, and he says that in a few days ago the day Jin's division was sent to the mission he went ahead, so he talks to everyone, ordering that from now on they must walk alone, and if any of them walk in a group he himself will kill them all. And he says that if they understand they should spread out now, and Murican thinks that that kid will continue telling him to do annoying things, and the dragon says that Jin must think that because he is the promised contractor he would be the one. Bam 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 of everything, but he says it won't be like that, but on second thought he says that being the contractor ends up doing what? Boy is all that, and while he is regretting this boring task, he feels a presence that scares him, and he asks what kind of thing it is. He says that presence is coming there. He keeps asking himself where it came from. Thing like that, and Murican thinks that it won't go away on its own, and he's happy that those kids are just from 3 stars because Jin would have noticed his barrier immediately, so he covers the place along with that creature. However, Bop feels something different and notices that it has gotten darker, wondering if it's going to rain. Meanwhile, the Murican keep an eye on that thing and ask in dragon form who dares to release its presence without your permission. But in this he notices that it was not a form of life but a relic from the ancient era, a giant from the cemetery, he says, who is sure that all dragons got rid of them 2,000 years ago, and he asks what one thing he should be protecting the tombs of the dead gods he is doing there of all places. He says that whatever the reason, this is not a friendly meeting, so he says he will eliminate him in a single attack and then blow on the monster, eradicating him completely, and the Murican says that it has been a long time since he used his powers to veil, and says his body is sore. He says this can't just be a giant from the remaining cemetery, and he says there's no way this isn't related to Zipfel. He asks what the fuck is going on, but he says, for now you need to hide this from the boy because he can simply protect you if something happens. What if he can only grow at this rate for 10 years? He might actually be able to fight Zipfel. This is a guy who he seems to have literally come out of a betrayal. Jin, he talks to his Lord Vikhel saying that there is a problem. He says that left cousin the giant in the cemetery was destroyed, and he is Buvard Giant the Transformer, and seeing what I say that he heard this and says that the cemetery giant fell in the middle of the night, and Buvard is irritated by this because who would do it? Something so horrible like breaking a work of art, but seeing what I say, that's not the important thing now, because who? He ended up with the giant in the cemetery. It was a dragon, and it was the shadow dragon. He says he checked the scene himself. However, Buvard is surprised by the dragon and asks if the dragons have already realized his plans. But since I speak, which is still not certain, but it is a clear warning, and for now he should take good care of this place, and he says that he will assign some useful men to him. They should arrange a meeting with Zipfel, and in the near future on that. Zad starts to praise Jinho, saying that he managed to complete his mission successfully and returned safely from that hellhole that is Mummet. Then he says that he certainly surpassed the port flags that gave him the mission. They will be very happy with this. He thanks his uncle, and with that Zed dismisses everyone, and while the cadets continue congratulating Jean, the envious people don't stop talking, asking if they heard about the rumors and saying that apparently some Mago coincidentally attacked the inn where the target was staying, and they say that the young man, Master Jinha, is very lucky, and they say that the world is unfair and it is not enough to be a run candle. He is also blessed with good luck, and for some of them at best they will always be intermediate class cadet no matter the as much as they try, and he says it would be less annoying if at least he was skilled, but young Master Jinha doesn't. Maximum 4 stars, and all his minions are 3 stars, so he asks if Sinho will just watch this happens, but he asks what he can do, and he says they may hate him, but the boy is still an Arcandel of Blood Hour, and he says that Mill and Ein gave him a direct order, so they don't have what to do. But the boy starts to get closer, and he wondered if the boy had heard him, but from that distance it would be very difficult. But Jean speaks, who managed to hear everything, and asks Kajin how his arm is. He says that he has to thank the young doctor for having A clean cut was made which made it easier for the doctors to fix him back, and the boy said they were having a conversation. Very interesting. They say that all they can do is talk badly behind his back and hope that the boy understand, and he says there's nothing for him to understand. After all, it's not like he's a flag bearer yet, and technically speaking he's not superior of him, but Kajim says that this is just in technical terms because just a few words are what he needs to end the inferior like him, and Jean asks why he thinks he would do something like that, and Kajin says it's because he's being nice of respect, and Jim says that this is definitely something unpleasant, and the guy doesn't keep quiet saying that in fact truth, it's unpleasant to see everyone recognize him when he only completed his mission by pure luck. So Jean says that it seems like he misunderstood something, and he says that he didn't call Kaijin unpleasant because he's there making fun or disrespecting, and he says that Kajim as a 5-star knight, he is one of the most skilled in the class. Intermediate, and it means he must be stronger than the boy, so he asks why everything he is doing is talk shit behind his back, and he says he thought he was very clear when he said that anyone could challenge him at any time. So Kajin asks if the boy is serious, he says that's it and sends him peg. Airing his sword, he says he has no intention of taking it easy, so they are going to do it right. So Jean recognizes. It seems like the boy doesn't want any aura restrictions, and Jean says he nailed it, but the guy says he's going to regret it even now, and a fight begins, and Jean says that his attacks are heavy, but he is nothing compared to the ones he will have to face in the future, and the guy starts asking if Jean can already see reality because he's not yet in a level that can pick a fight with him. So when he throws his Jean sword at her near her face, and then he gets kicked in the middle of the stomach, which throws him away, but while he is being hit, the Kajin tries to hit him again, but Jean can see his sword. He says that just like Jean, he was almost hit by Ratona's steel ball. He can see the trajectory of Kajin's attacks, and he says that there are infinite directions in which a sword can cut the air. But there are not many trajectories that a 5-star knight can use, especially if his opponent is consumed by anger, so he says he will finish this duel with 3 moves. Jean says he has already read them all. His attacks, he won't be able to beat him anymore, but Kajin keeps saying that he must be talking a lot shit. With that, they come back and exchange attacks. He says that first he will cut from the left, and secondly Jean will make a balance go upwards, and finally for his final attack he will use the aura that a 5-star knight won't be able to block, and then Kajin falls to the ground wondering how he did it make that attack, but Jean says that he thought it would take a few years to reach the 5-star aura, so Kajin asks if he cheated because he was a 5-star, but the boy says he never cheated on him, I didn't know him very well, he doesn't pick fights, he can't win. So the brothers come running, asking what is happening, and when he notices that Jean defeated the Kajin, they are paralyzed, and Jean speaks to. They say it's nothing, and when the boy passes by them, they are completely terrified, and already with the Kajin sisters says he was defeated by Jean, and they ask if he really wants her to believe that. He says he doesn't have it a lot to say, so Ain asks if he gave him some change or did he take it easy because he was a run candle, but he says he didn't do that at all, so I wonder what happened after all. He's saying that Jean became a Cyanora user is this fast at only 15 years old, and Kajin says that everyone at the training camp saw it and didn't. It was just him. That aura was definitely that of a 5-star, but they say it doesn't matter because it's their fault for creating so much expectation in him and telling the guy to get out of there now. In the meantime, they stay puddles, and they wonder if this means that Jean is showing him his fangs, but Thousand says it's not just for them. He actually showed his fangs to the entire clan, and she says that in the next mission she will send some of his men with him to a place that will definitely become his tomb. That's because he's a sister, right? Imagine if it wasn't. So Jill tells Jean that the Garden of Swords is in an uproar and everyone is shocked by his achievement. He says that the first patriarch, his father and Luna were the only 3 in history who became 5-star knights at 15 years old, and he says that with this one he has 5-star swordsmanship, magic of 4 and 4-star spiritual energy. He says that 5-star swordsmanship is something that not even he expected, and all he did was the constant training of the Claristone, and before he knew it he reached the 5-star level. He speaks. It seems that the 3 powers he has, spiritual energy, magical power, and aura, affect each other whenever one gets stronger. He says that when he went through the congestion of spiritual energy, he felt the path that the aura and the flow of mana opened, rising an internship, and he says he doesn't know anything about it because he's the only person to use the 3 powers, but they are very intertwined, so he asks Gil who put that flower there, and she says that the flower was placed while he was away, so she tidies it up and asks if she should throw it away. But he tells her to leave it there because he doesn't feel any magic or curses coming. So anyway, he says that he shamelessly revealed that he became a 5-star knight 15 years ago, and his brothers will be desperate, including his older brother Joshua, who was recognized as a likely patriarch. Then, speaking of him, after the first flag-bearer Luna Run Candel abdicated the succession, he is the second flag-bearer who grew up as a strong candidate to be the patriarch, and currently with the support of his mother Rosa Run Candel he's establishing his influence, and he says that it wouldn't have been bad to keep your secrets hidden skills for longer, but he decided it would be better if he revealed his current strength, and since he revealed that he is at 5 stars in front of people, the news will spread even outside the Hun Candel clan, and people around the whole world will talk about him. Then Murican notices that the boy is drooling his own egg a lot, but he says that the boy is right because his brothers will calm down a little with him being the center of attention, but he says that the most important thing of all is that his father will personally come to the Garden of Swords, and he says that his father wanted a successor besides Joshua. And he says that besides Luna, he is not satisfied with any of his brothers, and the only one who attracted his attention is interested in succeeding him, and because of that he decided that she is not fit to lead the clan. And after that, Joshua has begun to establish himself as the next patriarch, while Deepu's Luncha and Mary are secondary candidates for the succession, and this is how the succession dynamic was put into practice, but its appearance completely changed the game. And he says that his father is a person who gives opportunities regardless of age, so he will definitely give him one order like in the beginner's class, and he says that whatever it is, 2 things are certain. The first is that it will be a successors, and the second is protection, because his father does not want him to die at the hands of his brothers before he can take the test, and the reason for this is that it is a special case, and it says that as soon as the news is published, the clans and organizations from all over the world will ask for audiences with him. He says that this is true, and there is nothing more appropriate than a banquet to receive several people at once, and he says that as soon as he arrives there will be a banquet, so he tells Guile to prepare and also keep an eye on Murican, because if he turns into a human and blends into the crowd, everything will go down the drain in this. Murican starts to ask if the boy thinks he's a child, but Gil complies with his order, leaving Murican all limp. Then a few days later, Jay says that the butlers seem to be drowning in work, responding official correspondence, and she says she asked Petro, and apparently even the Vermont imperial family sent letters, and Jean says that this is incredible because he attracted the curiosity of those mysterious people, and G says that besides of this, the patriarch notified a visit to the main house through C, and he said that he will stay there for a month, so she coordinated the visit of the other clans and organizations to fit in with the agenda, but she says that his brothers are quite silent, and he says that if they were to try to keep him under control while he is in the dark attention, they would be announcing that they fear him or don't like Jin, and he says that this is a matter of opinion. Public, but while he speaks, the butler breaks in saying that he received a mission, but the location is in the ruins Cologne, and while he discovers this, Jin's mother starts to make a show of asking how they can call it a door. Flags when that's how they take care of business. Then she asks how they can send Jean to the territory Zipful, and so she calls her daughter's bit and notices that the boy has arrived, and he notices that Luncha, Han, and Vigo are present this time, and his mother asks if he heard that his next mission would be in the Cologne ruins. He says yes, but she says that this mission was cancelled. He no longer needs to go to Cologne, but the 2 girls start to complain to their mother, but she tells them. They remain silent, calling them that they only think about how to kill Jean, but I ask my mother if it is. It's strange that she wants to kill her brother, and she says it's true, and honestly she doesn't understand why her mother is protecting him so much, and so her mother asks what they said and says that if they didn't go crazy they should continue to open their mouths. But they both say that until now she and her father persuaded them brothers to fight, while she remained silent, and she asks if that's not why the clan demands this competition, and she says that as her mother knows, everyone there grew up being loved by each other since they were younger, and the other says this is true. She also received difficult missions while she was in the intermediate class because of their brothers, and the matriarch says that they are right about that and they need competition, and there is no reason to limit the modes, but she asks if any of them manage to reach level 5. Stars at 15 years old, and their faces almost fall to the floor, and her mother says that Jean is different from the rest of them, and she says that if they had reached the same level as Jean when they were young, you would have protected them too, and she says that what she means is that they are both not worthy of receiving her protection. It was a beautiful slap without a hand. I felt the pain here. That they also felt the pain, being stunned by this response, and she says that seeing their behavior after become flag bearers, she doesn't regret her decision. And as for them, Lunchahan and Vigo, she says how, part of the same generation of flag bearers, they must share responsibility for these two causing a mess, and she says that Luncha must author reflect for a while and Vigo they must return a famous clan sword, so they ask him what he wants. Say how to return a sword, and she says that she would like to take back all the famous swords in her possessions, but they must be grateful that it is limiting it to just one of each, so now she thinks what Jean is going to do after all she dragged all the brothers who have nothing to do with the situation, so she questions whether he will try to follow the path morality and ask her to punish you in their place, or you will feel superior and satisfied with this level of favoritism. And she wants to see how he will act in this situation, so Jean tells his mother that she really liked the mission they were given. Her sisters gave it to her, and she asks if he is saying that knowing what kind of place the ruins are, and he says that he does know because that is the Zipful territory that the Hun Kandel clan failed to conquer in the past. He knows it is dangerous, but he has no intention of backing down from this fight. And guys, if you like this video and want more videos here on the channel, leave a like, subscribe, and let's get to 100,000 subscribers, so I'll see you on next video. And I went